City Commission for the date September 17th, 2014. Would you please rise and join me in the flag salute?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
And I was putting first things first, but what preceded that would have been the roll call, please.
Commissioner Smith?
Here.
Commissioner Mum?
Here.
Commissioner Roth?
Here.
Commissioner Polly? Here. Mayor Neely?
Here. We got a proclamation to read, and I think I'll come forward and read it.
Mike.
Proclamation. Whereas September 17, 2014 marks the 227th anniversary of the drafting of the Constitution of the United States of America by the Constitutional Convention, and whereas it is fitting and proper to accord official recognition to this magnificent document and its memorial anniversary, and to this patriotic celebrations which commemorate the occasion, and whereas public law, my apologies, I forgot my glasses. Whereas Public Law 915 guarantees the issuing of the proclamation each year by the President of the United States of America, designating September 17th through 23rd as Constitution Week, and therefore now, I, Doug Neely, by virtue of the authority vested in me as Mayor of the City of Oregon City, in the State of Oregon, do hereby proclaim September 17th through the 23rd, 2014 as Constitutional Week, and I have signed it here. And I think we have somebody here that is going to accept this proclamation and perhaps wishes to share a few words. This is a tremendous occasion, of course.
Thank you, and thank you, commissioners. How many of you remember this? We, the people of the United States, in order to form a more perfect union, establish justice, ensure domestic tranquility, provide for the common defense, promote the general welfare, and secure the blessings of liberty to ourselves and our posterity, do ordain and establish the Constitution for the United States of America. These words, written 227 years ago, are the preamble of our Constitution. This is the beginning of Constitution Week, September 17th through the 23rd. It is a time meant to celebrate the signing of this important document. The week-long observance was promoted by the National Society, Daughters of the American Revolution, and adopted by Congress in 1955, and then signed into law by President Eisenhower in 1956. In 2004, the Congress made it mandatory that schools receiving federal funding must instruct students on the Constitution on September 17th. Constitution Day. I'm Deanna Way, and this is Phyllis Hines. We are both members of the Daughters of the American Revolution, Susanna Lee Barlow chapter here in Oregon City. The DAR is a nonprofit, non-political, volunteer women's service organization dedicated to its mission of historic preservation, education, and patriotism. The U.S. Constitution is the basic document for our republic to protect the individual liberties of all citizens through written law, and what our forefathers fought for. Please read beyond the preamble to understand the structure of the three branches of our representative government. Study the amendments and the Bill of Rights. Know your Constitution. Thank you.
Thank you.
Brought constitutions for everyone. I'll leave them at the back.
You know, but go ahead and actually, I don't know if it was such occasion. About 2 years ago, I was given a copy of the Constitution. And, you know, it is an incredibly simple, easy document to read. It is not long, doesn't take you long, and I wish our city charter was as simple as the U.S. Constitution. But in any case. A few weeks ago, I was notified of a special tribute that was being given to, and I'll explain it in a moment, to a veteran that had lost his life in Vietnam. His name is Larry Dahl. He received the Medal of Honor, and on Sunday he was inducted into the Oregon Military Museum's Hall of Fame. I was given the honor of accepting it, and the reason that happened was they could not identify, after this many years, any living family member to accept it. And he was born in Oregon City, so they asked me as mayor of Oregon City to accept it, and I was honored to do so. He received his Medal of Honor by giving his life. A grenade had been thrown into the area where he and his companions were. He jumped on the grenade and died, protecting the lives of those around him. The actual recognition of the Medal of Honor is held by Clackamas Historical Society, and we were given this representation of the induction. And I thought probably the most appropriate organization to actually receive it. We've taken photographs for our own records and so forth, but I felt the appropriate recognition would go to our local chapter of the VFW. And I'd like to invite DJ Ruger, who is the post commander, to come forward and accept this. And I believe you will be having it there at your facility there near the Museum of the Oregon Territory. Is that right?
We will, yes, sir.
Yes. Well, it's a great honor to have received it. It's a great honor to present it also to you.
Thank you, Mr.
Is there anything you care to say, or?
Sure. I don't think I need the microphone.
Well, we need it.
Yes, you do.
We need it for actually
Very
the.
well. The Veterans of Foreign Wars of the United States is a family. Mr. Dahl's family is not here to receive this. We will act for his family and hold it in trust, and we will display it proudly in our post home, the Clackamas County Veterans Memorial Building. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it. Something that might have come up at announcements at the end I'm going to talk about now. On the 7th of this month, Tyrone Woods, who was the Navy SEAL who was killed at Benghazi, who was killed at Benghazi defending our representatives there. He was also an Oregon City resident, and he got recognition, a tribute sign placed on Highway 213 as you're going up there. After that, we had that presentation by our two representatives, Representative Brent Barton and Bill Kennemer, who put forward in the House of Representatives, State House of Representatives, the bill to have that memorial put forward. Tyrone Woods' mother came up to me and informed me that the Medal of Honor recognition plaque, which was at the Clackamas Historical Society, still is, but it was actually displayed at the back of the parking lot, and it was very difficult to see it. Mayor Byers of Gladstone was there as well, and he's also a member of the board of the Clackamas Historical Society, and they put it on their agenda for their last meeting to discuss where would be a better place to have that Medal of Honor plaque placed. So I anticipate that will be occurring as well. So thank you for coming. All the representatives from the Veterans of Foreign Wars, would you please stand? And actually, any veterans that are here, would you please stand? I think it was our last meeting, maybe the one before, where we put forward the resolution recognizing Rivalry Day between West Lynn and Oregon City. Now, the date that was read in that resolution was wrong. That date was, I think, the 26th of this month. Well, that Rivalry Day has already occurred. What, do you remember what date that was?
September 5th, I think.
September 5th, I think that, yeah.
I think it was the 5th.
Okay, we think it's the 5th. In any case, we already had that Rivalry Day, so the resolution was wrong. I decided not to read the resolution all over again because it was sort of irrelevant, but I thought I'd take this moment to at least...
And we lost.
I wasn't going to say that. But we are the overall winner in time.
Yes, we are.
And also, I believe we had this fantastic win at one point where they got 0 and we got how many points? 90-something? 90-something. So
Long time ago.
the Oregon City High School is the overall winner of that particular event. I guess we are now in different leagues, but that Rivalry Day will go on, I imagine, eternally.
Yeah, I think so.
Okay, thank you. We'll go on to our regular agenda. If we have any citizens' comments for anything that is not on the agenda, this is the time to submit them. Keep those comments down to 3 minutes, and it appears that we have none. Okay, then we'll go on to our regular business. Is there anything anybody wants pulled from the agenda? From the consent agenda?
No.
Hearing none, we'll go on to our public hearings. Ordinance for introduction, 141012, an ordinance adopting an update to the Oregon City Sanitary Sewer Master Plan, an ancillary document to the Oregon City Comprehensive Plan. And we'll be hearing from Mr. Conkle, our Director of Community, what is it?
Community
Development,
Planning.
which I never remember. So the Director of our Planning Department.
I have a new title every night. It's great.
Love it.
Thank you, Mayor, Evening Commissioners. I'll be presenting the introduction for proposed ordinance 14-1012, an update of the Oregon City Sanitary Sewer Master Plan. My presentation is going to be very brief, and I'm going to turn it over to the Public Works Director, Mr. Lewis, and he can provide much more detail and help answer any questions as we go through the process. But essentially, the proposed update is an amendment, an ancillary document to our adopted comprehensive plan. This will be the city's guiding document for providing sanitary sewer services. Really, when you look at this, there's 4 criteria that you must weigh: the plan implementation process, adequacy of the plan to meet the needs, the plan reflects the community needs, and that it's updated with factual information. The staff report that's been provided outlines how each of those criteria have been met as we've gone through this process, and beginning with working with the consultants to make sure that we have an understanding of the needs for the build-out to our urban growth boundary for providing sanitary sewer over the next 20 years, as well as public engagement, reaching out to the community to involve them in this process, and updating the plan with the most updated information that we have, both at the state and federal level, as well as recent concept plans that we have completed. And so part of this is that the sanitary sewer collection serves nearly 33,000 people spread across approximately 9.3 miles. Current users of the sanitary sewer collection system total over 10,400 total connections, including just about 9,700 residential, approximately 520 commercial, and 130 industrial. The city owns the following infrastructure: over 148 miles of gravity lines ranging in size from approximately 2 to 36 inches in diameter, 37,000 manholes, 12 major pump stations, and 6 miles of sanitary force mains. So it's a very complex and large system that we have the responsibility of maintaining. And
Yes.
and providing, making sure that we have plans in place to ensure that we can accommodate the growth that we expect in our community over the next 20 years. So with that, I'll go ahead and turn it over to Mr. Lewis.
Thank you, Tony. Appreciate all that. We're bringing forth the ordinance, the first reading of the ordinance to adopt the sewer master plan. So I was counting meetings. We've been before the commission at least 9, maybe 10 times with the sanitary sewer master plan over the last couple of years. And so this is, and in fact, we just did another pretty detailed update in our work session just before this meeting. So we're not going to waste your time with a repeat of that. But because of the viewing audience and because we've got Jim here and he likes to talk to you folks, we are going to ask him to go through just a handful of slides to cover the sanitary sewer master plan, which I think from what we've already heard is widely accepted, and we haven't really heard much feedback on concerns with regard to the master plan. So with that, Jim.
Thank you, John, and rest assured, John took most of my slides away, so it will be a much briefer presentation. So the need for the update, number one, the old plan was completed in 2003, so it's well over 10 years old, and these documents need to be periodically updated to be of any utility to the city. As mentioned, the population is about 33,000 or so now. You're looking at an increase to about 52,500 with a full build-out, so a significant number of new folks or new residents in the city. There's been some changes in land use, allowing for different development than was originally planned with the 2003 plan. And of major importance is the expansion of the urban growth boundary, bringing new lands into the city that can be developed and will need sewer service. When you operate a collection system, there's a number of challenges that need to be overcome and problems. So we call these the sewer system deficiencies. Number one, hydraulic deficiencies. These are deficiencies, basically undersized pipe. Pipe not large enough to carry the flow that's been introduced to it. In addition, we have problems with structural and operational deficiencies. These are cracks and fractures and other types of problems that can occur in pipes. Sometimes they're associated with age. Other times they're associated with other types of environmental influences on the pipe itself. Pump stations are a necessary part of the collection system, and they're subject to a number of problems. There are complex mechanical electrical systems with a lot of moving parts. Those parts wear out and need to be updated. And then finally, excessive inflow and infiltration. This is usually water associated with what we call wet weather conditions that gets into the collection system, not wastewater. This is water from groundwater or stormwater, and it uses up available capacity, capacity that could have been used for serving wastewater. To address those deficiencies, we basically have categorized our projects or our capital improvement projects into a couple different categories. Hydraulic upgrades to meet those hydraulic deficiencies that I mentioned in the system, a sewer rehabilitation and replacement program to address those structural and operational defects that are in the sewer system, and finally an I&I abatement program to further explore where the I&I is getting into the system and helping us identify where we can reduce I&I cost effectively. This is just kind of a reminder of one of the important elements of the program, and this is addressing the sewer deficiencies that I mentioned. We have several areas here that have been identified as moratorium areas. These are areas that the sewer upgrades that we're defining in our master plan will provide service to those areas so that those moratoriums can be lifted. So this slide takes all of those elements that I have briefly defined and rolls them together. We have attempted to address the needs of the moratorium up front and push some of the R&R activities and I&I investigations out a little bit further so we could have a better distribution of the capital program and the needs for that program over the long term. And with that, John?
So tonight we're asking you to approve the ordinance, have it hear public testimony first, but approve the ordinance. So adopting the sanitary sewer master plan. It's as you remember, we've already adopted a moratorium, which is important. We've been talking about rates and really, if in a perfect world, we would have had you adopt this first, and then and we wouldn't have had a moratorium. But here we are. We feel like we've got a document that's a long time in coming, and look forward to your recommendation for approval.
Just also, just to wrap up, that this presentation and this application was reviewed by the Planning Commission, and their last meeting was on September 8th of this year, and they voted unanimously 7-0, recommending approval to the City Commission for their consideration.
Do we have any discussion? We had some discussion of this at a special study session earlier, where issues about rates came up to support this, but this is the actual ordinance to change the change the master plan itself. So, any questions?
I don't. We've talked about this a lot, so I'm okay.
Do I have a motion for first reading?
I think
You have
you have
public
a,
comment.
Oh, excuse me. Yes.
Public
Pardon me.
comment.
Go. Yes, I have public comment. So I see we have William Gifford on the floor to speak to it.
Mr. Mayor, City Commissioners, my name is William Gifford. I live in Oregon City, and speaking as the president of the Oregon City Business Alliance, my other comments are going to be pertaining to the rates, but pertaining to the plan, which I support. I did have a question about the very first, probably the second slide or so of this presentation that referred to the expansion of the UGB, and I don't know that it was an expansion of the UGB that precipitated this. Was it really?
No, it was.
No, it wasn't. That's why I was just surprised when I saw that on. Oh, he's cringing over here. Yeah, sorry to catch you on that, but I just didn't want it to be thought that we expanded the UGB and that's what's causing this situation.
Oh,
So,
no.
No.
it would be if the properties that were in the UGB were annexed to the city.
Yes.
That's a totally separate issue than the actual UGB
Yes.
itself. So I just wanted to make that clear.
thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments? Close the public hearing.
Want me to read it? Want me to read it?
Yeah, well, we didn't get the motion yet.
You want to do the motion before the reading? That's fine with me.
Yeah.
Move to approve 14-5.
One
First reading?
Oh,
First reading.
sorry. Okay, first reading of 14-1012.
Got a second?
Second.
Okay, moved by Commissioner Mum, seconded by Commissioner Smith.
This is ordinance number 14-1012, an ordinance of the City of Oregon City adopting an update to the Oregon City Sanitary Sewer Master Plan, an ancillary document to the Oregon City Comprehensive Plan.
Vote, please. Passes unanimously.
Thank you very much. That's
Thank you.
a culmination of a lot of work, so appreciate that very much.
Next, we have an ordinance for introduction. 14, we've had a discussion about a couple of resolutions. Now, when are those resolutions going to come forward? They're not specifically identified in this agenda.
Say that again? I'm
A
sorry.
couple of resolutions dealing with rates. No, that's not for tonight.
That is for
That
tonight.
is-
Yeah,
That
later-
is for
later
Just
tonight.
not on this
Okay,
agenda.
very
Yeah,
good.
that's item
Okay, yeah.
7A.
Okay.
So we've got some.
Yeah, that's right.
Other
Excuse
items
me.
to discuss
The
first.
ordinance for introduction, adopting the Lynn Avenue, Leland Road, Myers Road corridor plan. We also saw this in a study session.
Thank you, Mayor. So I'll be presenting or proposed ordinance number 14-1013, adoption of the Lynn Avenue, Leland Road, Myers Road corridor plan. The Lynn Avenue corridor plan was developed to address deficiencies in the pedestrian and bicycle facilities along the corridor. The area of the plan is from 5th Street at Jackson Street to Myers Road at Moccasin Way. Along this route, there are very few existing sidewalks and designated bicycle lanes. The plan was developed with the city's preferred street sections to address these deficiencies when future development occurs. The plan is also looking at connecting important features along the corridor, such as parks and schools, by means of paths, sidewalks, and bicycle lanes. In addition, the plan will address the needs of the intersection of Lynn Avenue, Warner, Milne, Warner, Parrott, Central Point by proposing an intersection improvement plan. Mr. Lewis, with his consultant team, held several public involvement and comment processes as they went through this process, including a questionnaire on the city's website, meeting with the 5 neighborhood associations along the corridor, meeting with the 3 private property owners that would be affected by the construction of the roundabout at the Leland, Warner, Milne, Warner, Parrott intersection. 3 meetings with the Transportation Advisory Committee, meeting with the school representatives, as well as meetings with the Citizen Involvement Committee, the Historic Review Board, a public open house, and then meetings with the Planning Commission and the City Commission to update them on the work that have been done through work sessions, as well as the Planning Commission did hold a public hearing on this item on August 25th of 2014. When the Planning Commission reviewed this, they received several comments as they went through the process. They did make the following recommendations for the City Commission to consider. Consider the use of rumple strips or other visual methods to adequately separate bicycle lanes from vehicular travel lanes, particularly on inside curves. Maximize the use of green techniques and landscaping to make the roundabout and intersection as visually attractive as possible. Recommend moving the center of the 5-legged roundabout north and west in order to minimize impacts to the Plaid Pantry property. Look at options to improve the intersection with Electric Avenue with respect to stormwater management improvements. And utilize efficient street lighting to maximize safety along the right-of-way corridor. And so with those recommendations, the Commission did vote unanimously to bring this before you tonight at the hearing. In the staff report that we provided, there were several comments that we tried to outline and how some of those were trying to be addressed. Some of them were questions that are going to require more detailed work as we refine this plan even more for purposes of construction at a later date. With that, we've had some discussion with folks who are going to testify tonight, and there's going to be some additional information that's submitted for the first time tonight that we have not had a chance to review. I think what we'd be looking at, even though the staff report does recommend approval, is we'd be requesting, allowing us time to review the information that's being submitted tonight and formulate responses for you. Changing that recommendation to a continuance to a date certain, and we'll provide that because I don't have my calendar open right at the moment, but probably about 30 days. And so I'll go ahead and turn it over to Mr. Lewis to provide an additional presentation on the proposal.
Thank you, Tony. So I just noticed the introduction to the corridor plan is kind of misleading. You've seen this before, and we've been in several public meetings. So it's less about an introduction; it's more about moving to the concept plan. The draft is as complete as we were planning to take it. Although there were the Planning Commission comments that we would intend to incorporate before the final hearing. So we hired the firm of Wallace Engineering to complete this plan. They along with DKS, who's our transportation engineer, have had a fair amount of input on the plan itself. So I'm going to go through it relatively quickly. You've seen this presentation before. So again, for courtesy of the public, I'm going to go through it. The plan is it's a fairly large document. It's got a lot of details in it. Most of that's folded up maps and things like that, so that explains some of the thickness, but it's basically it's got 6 chapters that take you from the introduction and the existing conditions and move you through to an implementation plan and cost estimates as well. So it's a comprehensive plan. It's our only comprehensive plan for this corridor. So it's a very important corridor for Oregon City. We've got Malala Avenue and we've got this corridor as one of the major corridors that kind of bisect the city. So pretty important piece. The main reason for doing the corridor study was to provide additional insight and specifics that the transportation system plan didn't provide. So we think it's a refinement, or it is a refinement on that document, and several of these projects weren't actually listed in the transportation system plan. So it's a whole fix that we've divided into several smaller projects, so that might help us through implementation in the future. Just to remind you that it is a quarter plan; it's not a construction plan. There's lots of elements that go into implementation. So whenever we identify funding, first of all, then we move through, implementation of the various phases of the projects, or we may even dissect the project phases a little bit, depending on how the funding comes our way. So keep that in mind. This is a plan, and it will include refinements as we move forward with it. We have other concept plans in the city too. Malala Avenue is another example of a concept plan where it helps staff guide the development review, and helps us helps guide. For instance, if we are going to pursue a grant, it helps us with that in detailed estimates. It's somewhat vetted through the public process. So those who review our request for funding have that information. We have something to say. Look, the community of Oregon City has gone through this concept plan, and that's why that provides a little more support than had we not completed the concept plan. So the corridor, originally we split into 4 pieces: the Lynn Avenue from 5th to Park Drive. Segment 2 we called Lynn Avenue from Park Drive to Leland. Segment 3 was Leland to Lynn Avenue and Myers Road. And segment 4 was from Myers Road to Moccasin Way. And we, as a part of our concept and hearing a lot of public comment, we added a couple of items, and we decided to add in a Singer Creek connectivity improvements, which are a lot of small projects mostly for pedestrians, and then the Gardner Middle School pedestrian improvements, and the Central Point operational enhancement, or what we call the roundabout at Central Point and Warner Parrott, Warner Milne, Leland, the 5-leg intersection. So again, we did a lot to inventory existing conditions, bike path locations, or locations where we don't have bike paths, same with sidewalks, bus stops, destination locations. So we did a lot of inventory work on this project. What we heard from the community and kind of identified ourselves was there were some major concerns. Really, that connectivity piece for pedestrians and non-vehicular kinds of transportation. Safety. The corridor has a lot of windy roads, narrow roads, so there were safety concerns. Stormwater management and how we deal with that, and then just the constrained right-of-way, especially on the first segment in particular, although all the segments have some form of right-of-way constraints. We align that with some planning priorities, so fix the multimodal concerns, improve connectivity and access, fix those safety problems, and address stormwater issues. We've got, again, the 4 segments. I'm not going to go through the details in too much, other than we are looking at lane configurations. The first segment is probably the most, has probably the most specifics and is the most complicated. In order to deal with that, the recommendation was for a 10 to 12 foot shared use path, a concrete shared use path, a raised concrete shared use path, so bicyclists and pedestrians could use that lane as they move up the hill. And then a shoulder, but really the idea would be pedestrians would use that shared use path as opposed to the shoulder on the downhill side, and bicycles coming down the hill would be able to share the lane with the vehicle, or use that widened shoulder if they felt the need for that. So there's some walls, there's definitely some complexities. It's our most complicated segment of the alignment, and so we put a lot of energy into that particular segment. The other we've got segment 2. It's mostly infill of sidewalks. All these sections look similar in that we've got some existing sidewalks and pathways, so we're trying to match those, but still have comfortable pedestrian zones and places to treat stormwater. So there are some planter strip facilities and stormwater facilities along the route. We've also identified crossing alternatives and crossing improvements. So again, that's true for segment 3. Segment 4, the Singer Creek Connectivity improvements really looked at ways that pedestrians and bicyclists could move without using Lynn Avenue. So trying to connect some existing pedestrian routes in ways that would enhance access to the park and some of the other destinations, get people down into the McLaughlin neighborhood, and just look at how best to connect those connectivities, how best to connect those existing features. We also we heard a fair amount from the community about the Gardner Middle School pedestrian improvement project and some of the other connectivity pieces where there may be pathways now, but they might be dirt pathways between a fence line in a residential neighborhood and the school. And then really the big ones were off of Lynn Avenue, between Lynn Avenue and the grade school, in trying to identify pedestrian routes that would help facilitate children walking to school as opposed to taking the bus or having their parents drop them off. So there are no existing sidewalks on Hedges Street or Hood Street. I forget the other street, and I can't read it from here, but those two red lines reflect, thanks, Katie. Those two red lines reflect kind of where the sidewalks are planned. This is probably the most concerning piece or interesting piece, depending on your perspective, the Central Point operational enhancement. We've shown a 5-leg roundabout. We looked at another option, which was a 4-leg roundabout, and recognized that this one solves the safety concerns that might be associated with a signalized intersection, and it also solves the safety concerns associated with the left turn off of Central Point Road onto Warner Parrott Road. It is a substantial project, and something that we want. What we heard from the public was, if you're going to put in a roundabout, put in one large enough that can accommodate trucks safely and move traffic efficiently, and do that in an aesthetic way. Speaking of aesthetics, the green shown in here doesn't necessarily represent landscaping. I think it's generally showing you medians and areas that aren't necessarily travel way. So, in the detailed design of this, we've got a lot of work to do on this roundabout with regard to a detailed design. But we wanted to incorporate the intersection into the planning because it's an important piece, and it's without addressing this at a concept level would have been a gap in the corridor plan that we just didn't want to leave. So we're recognizing that there is a fair amount of work to do on the design, and this idea of moving it to the northwest makes some sense, especially when you look at this impacts all the properties, but some gain a little property and others lose a little property, and the biggest loss is at the corner where the Oregon City School District owns the parcel on the corner. That right there, this roundabout really impacts that corner a fair amount. The other one is the shopping center between Central Point and Leland Road. We see that having some impacts. We see it being that there's potential for improvements there, but we also recognize that access to that facility is very important. It's a thriving business, so we are aware of that and wanting to be able to continue to work through that as we move through implementation of the plan. So the end results is implementation. How do we move forward with these projects? We've phased it based on what we heard from the community and what we know to be the most significant concerns for the community and movement of traffic. So phase 1, we thought those sidewalks to get to Gardner Middle School are pretty important, and we heard a lot of feedback. Not anybody was thought that was something that shouldn't be done. We also think some of the low-hanging fruit with Singer Creek connectivity improvements is a good place to go, where maybe we could extend the pathways and help some of those safety issues with pedestrians trying to use what we call segment 1. So it gets them from the park down to Pearl Street and then on to McLaughlin neighborhood. Segment 1, there's definitely safety concerns there. We'd like to, one of the things that I forgot to mention was the closure of Electric Avenue and using that space for possibly parking, possibly stormwater, and landscape improvements there, and help with the safety of the left turns as you come down, traffic that just wants to rush onto Electric Avenue. So create a center turn lane there that would both protect those left turners but also slow them down a little bit before they get onto Sharman. And the next one is the roundabout. Phase 5 is the roundabout. And again, we've got a lot of work to do to kind of pull that together, but we think it's a community item that they're very interested in. And then the other segments as well, they follow. And I would tell you, anybody that lives along any of the other segments would advocate for their segment to be a higher priority. There's a lot of interest in seeing this plan move forward, and so we'd like to take that one piece at a time. Whether we stick to this or not, it really depends on the grant funding and how do we match grant with the various kinds of projects. That's probably going to drive things more than what we would like to get done first or last. Next steps, there's not many left. We're really kind of looking to the City Commission to, the Planning Commission's looked at it, and so they've submitted their comments and they support the plan. Really, we're looking for the City Commission to review and approve the plan as well. So with that, I'm open to questions.
Any questions from the... I'll have a comment, but I'll probably wait for it until after the general public speaks.
Yeah.
With that, we're going to go ahead and open the public hearing. Do you have a question? I'm sorry.
Yeah, I do have a question. When I first came on the commission, there was a discussion of rerouting, or not rerouting, but encouraging traffic to use Lynn 5th rather than Malala, and changing the traffic because the traffic was so heavy on Malala. Would this improvement increase the speed along that corridor, and is that part of what is driving this?
I had not heard that transition from Malala to this corridor.
No, it was when I was very first here now.
Okay, and I was here when you were very first here, so I hadn't heard that. I think this plan doesn't encourage traffic to use this over Malala. I don't see anything there that's encouraging that, other than people finding it maybe a little more attractive than it is now. I think the pedestrian access and the bicycle access is likely going to be improved, although there's not a lot of that on Malala Avenue either. So, I think it provides those kind of enhancements, but I don't think vehicle traffic is going to be increased because of these improvements. And I would say that the speed,
that's what
the speed issue is something that we have considered. And so one of the things that we heard from the Planning Commission was also look for ways to reduce speed along the corridor. And so we think the narrower lanes help, the markings help, the street lighting help, the turn pocket help, especially on near Electric Avenue. We've also got pedestrian crossing safety measures that we've proposed, which include the rapid flashing beacons, like what we installed at 7th Street near the library, and street trees, those kind of things that just kind of give you a sense of a little bit more confinement. I believe is actually going to slow traffic through that corridor. So
I know McLaughlin had a big issue with the speed.
And I think once we get through those improvements and we see those changes, pursuing the state with another round of speed study and determine how can we reduce the speed on that corridor based on how drivers are using it, I hope will be one of the objectives of our design as we move forward.
Okay, thank you.
Then I'll go ahead and open the public hearing. Limit yourself to introduce yourself and indicate whether you're from Oregon City or not, and try to limit your comments to 3 minutes. Warren Kitchen and Bruce Martin, would you come forward and speak in that order? Warren Kitchen. Which one of you is Warren?
Warren's right there.
You're first.
You don't remember me? Well, this primarily concerns the roundabout. I was looking at the information that was given on the website, and this is where I'm getting it from. But it talks about a 90% reduction in fatalities And according to the Department of Transportation, no deaths have occurred there from 2008 to 2012, and no stats for years 2013 or this year. When they throw out information like that, it's hard to, give a big support for something that there's nothing going on, nothing's wrong. So it's hard to imagine any less fatalities than zero. Then it goes on to say a 76% reduction in injury sounds good until you see that in 2008, 1 person, 2009, no one injured, in 2011, 3 people injured, and finally in 2012, 2 people injured. No numbers for 2010, and no severity as to what type of injuries they were, or were they even caused by automobiles, for example. Trucks were listed as having 0 involvement, and taking some things into account, risk is an everyday factor. So going to the expense of the roundabout, is it really necessary? Is it really going to benefit anybody? Now, other benefits, it says drivers have more time to react to other cars and pedestrians. Advantages to older and younger drivers. Well, I've got a 16-year-old driver now, and she finds roundabouts rather intimidating. Reduces the severity of crashes. It mentions these things, but it doesn't give any proof. So it's hard to support it, again. And keeps pedestrians safer. How true is that? I can envision cars coming onto a roundabout and not slowing down nearly as much. There might be in more of a hurry, as far as I know. Now, on the other point, it said, saving money on electricity and maintenance. Okay, so it says $5,000 a year they're going to save. So if the roundabout costs $1 million, I hit my calculator, it comes out to 200 years to recoup the cost of that. Once again, information is lacking. Proof that it's really necessary is not there. It's mainly a residential area, and it's not going to expand any unless, the farmland is taken over. And then I will agree that it may allow traffic to flow better. It may handle more cars, but I think that's secondary to the expense. And to me, the role of government is to not just protect the public, pay the roads, etc., but to ensure the free flow of commerce and protect the welfare, i.e. pocketbook of the taxpayer. Now, the big thing here is businesses in the area. Jobs are tight. People, unemployment's high. And anytime you start messing with things, a construction project kills businesses. Look at the Milano Cafe out in Milano. The road construction there just absolutely killed that business. It was a good family-run business, and now they're bankrupt and people are unemployed. So, on that note, I conclude I do not give a yes vote for this.
Thank you very much.
I'm Bruce Martin. I'm the pastor at the Presbyterian Church on the corner that's most impacted in terms of property, other than what the school district or the city might relinquish for the roundabout. I've lived in Europe. I love roundabouts, but I also know that you don't slow down in a roundabout the more familiar with them you become. You just zip right through them like nothing. But my mother's 84 years old. She's got a roundabout up near Port Orchard where she lives, and that woman can't turn her neck. She's scared to death. She wings it. I've sat in the passenger seat, and she just goes for it. So it's not safe for people in our country that are so unfamiliar with it and have not grown up with it. It's a nightmare for them, especially for a person like my mother. She will choose not to go through that intersection. Secondly, we've got about 110 parking spaces there for about 200 people in worship. And if Betty Savage's proposal, which, I'm really for her survival in her business over there, and the trucks getting in and out for Plaid Pantry deliveries makes absolute sense for us. And we want to support the business community ourselves. But by doing that, there's a high risk, and I know it's a lot of conjecture, but there's a risk that we're going to lose quite a bit of parking where we're already quite short. And given that it rains here, and we have several elderly people who may get church late and the closer parking spots are taken up, they've got to walk longer and have a harder time and get soaked in the process, and that affects their joy and celebration of their worship on Sunday mornings and has a negative impact on them. Also, the the whole process hasn't been made aware to us. I've looked on the website as well, and thank you for your comments. I agree with what you said. It appears to me that we have never been notified. I checked with our secretary and staff, and I haven't seen any sign. The first inclination that we'd heard about it was when they came by and sat down in my office and said, this is what we're going to do. I've also filled out the online survey. The roundabout is not, to my knowledge, in that survey for public comment. It's just there. Not, do you want one? Do you not want one? Do you want 5? Do you want 4 streets in there? What are your concerns? I didn't see anything like that. It was just a stated fact. And as we talked, it wasn't a give and take discussion. It was, here it is, there you go, and you'll just have to live with it. It's theoretical now where that center point will be and where the roundabout itself will be placed. But it could have, it already will if it goes into effect, even as it is theoretically, going to take up the entire corner and affect the beautiful landscaping. We even had a public person come by out of the blue, stop, got out of her car and said, I've gone by your property so many times, I just had to come in and say you've got the most beautiful property around. And we put a lot of heart and soul into it for the city's good and the beauty of the public space. That's really going to change, and the landscaping schemes are city schemes, and they may not match our own. So just a tiny bit of concern. I just want to say one last thing. Thank you for your continuance. The comment that it won't be voted on finally tonight, right?
That's the recommend. Yep, that's their.
No, that's
Well, I sure would appreciate, I know it's your choice,
Recommendation.
but I would sure appreciate it because we've got work to do. We've been unaware. We would have been more engaged and involved. Seriously, not to be critical, we just didn't get the data and the information till really, really late. So we're kind of behind the curve. So
Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm going to direct one question to Mr. Lewis in terms of the accidents and fatalities. Were those statistics based on roundabouts in general?
Right. That
Yeah.
most of the data that's there is generally roundabouts safer. They eliminate the potential for cross intersection kind of accidents, and from a driver's perspective, not all drivers, but many drivers, they're a safer facility to use. And for the pedestrians, it's got to do with just crossing one or 2 lanes of traffic with traffic only coming one way, so you can.
I just want to clarify where the information that you were commenting on was coming from, and it was a general evaluation.
Can I say one small thing?
Yes.
When I quoted the accidents are from the Department of Transportation for the existing intersection now.
Yeah. We understand that.
Okay, so.
Yep. Thank you.
Thank you.
And I think Betty Savage was referred to in the previous statement. And Betty Savage and Jonathan Polowski, would you please come forward? And Betty, would you speak first, please?
Go first.
No, in the order you called. That's the only control I've got.
Okay. First of all, I'm Betty Savage, the owner of the Savage Mini Mall on the 5 Corner intersection. I've gone through this before where I've had property saying that you needed it for the 5 Corner intersection. And I won't go into all the details on it because it didn't come out very pretty, although I felt that I negotiated nicely with the city to get them out of the mess they put themselves in at that time. However, this time, I feel I shouldn't have to give up 1 inch, 1 foot of my property in any shape or form. This inhibits me as far as my income is concerned, because at my age now, this is my only income. I have already lost, because of the information spreading around about this roundabout, the last tenant that I put in the mall, which took me 4 years to get in. Not because I didn't have a lot of choices, but I'm a little selective, and I like people who, when they come in, give them a chance to get into business, and I negotiate with them as much as I can to do them that way. However, the way I look at this now, I'm the largest taxpayer. In fact, I think I'm about the only taxpayer on that corner. I know that school didn't do it. I paid them. I know the church has a benefit. So I look at it the fact that being the largest payer there, I shouldn't have to be penalized the most. And the way this looks, that's what's happening. I might be old, but I'm still able to handle things. And as a result, I'm not happy one way or another about it. There are several things that will inhibit the mall and my tenants, and I look out for my tenants in every way I can in order to keep them there. And I think it stands to reason that when Plaid Pantry came in 20-some years ago, and they're still there, that I cooperate with my tenants 110%. I'm very upset that I lost the last tenant because of this rumor about this roundabout. They felt that the construction of all this isn't going to give them an opportunity to get their legs on the ground of opening that business. I don't think I have anything more to say on it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Jonathan.
Mayor Daley, Commissioners, thank you for the opportunity to talk to you tonight. My name is Jonathan Polonsky. I'm the COO for Plaid Pantry. Plaid Pantry operates 108 convenience stores. We're locally owned and operated here in Oregon. 4 of our stores are in Oregon City. The first store went in back in 1978 on Malala. That's store 54. And the store I'd like to talk about tonight is store 142, which has been there 30 years. We're very concerned about the impact the proposed traffic circle will have on our business. We believe the design of the circle will transition our convenience store into a very unconvenient store. Mostly due to the inability of our customers to get out of it. It's kind of like going to be landlocked. Once you get in, you're not going to get out. Hotel California. Our customers typically come to us not as a destination, but they're en route to somewhere else. So I think there's going to be a traffic engineer up here. I think their jargon is it's a linked trip. So they come in, they're on their way to someplace else, make a purchase, and on they go. The problem is now, if this is constructed the way it is, they're not going to get to go unless they happen to be going down Lynn Avenue the way they want to go. So that's going to make it very inconvenient for a lot of our customers. Additionally, the placement of the proposed driveways is not suited for our delivery trucks. We get large trucks pretty much on a daily basis. And the way that the proposed driveways are set up, it looks like they're going to have to really swing wide in order to even attempt to make that turn, which is going to encroach on the pedestrian people trying to cross those streets, or it's going to take out the sidewalk. There's going to be blind spots. So that's a huge issue for us. And then once they get into that parking lot, now they're going to be really limited because of the way they have to get in on where they can park. And probably, it looks to me like they're going to have to park out close to the circle, which is going to make sight lines very challenging for anybody on Central Point trying to look to see what they have to look out for, other pedestrians, other bikes. Our biggest concern is our customers and our employees. Most of our customers come from the neighborhood. We are unique in that we are neighborhood convenience stores. People come to us on foot, they come to us on bike, by bus. And wheelchairs, yes. And so I myself am an avid cyclist, and I live out closer to Washington County, but there are traffic circles out there. They're single lane traffic circles, and there's not much traffic in them. But over the last couple of years, I've had some pretty scary near misses, even in those situations. When you look at this circle with the extra traffic and the fact that there's 2 lanes, and people are going to have to weave in and out and have a pretty big workload trying to figure out what's coming at them. If there's a cyclist there, I mean, they are at a huge disadvantage. Usually cars win. So Plaid Pantry and our landlord Betty have hired a transportation engineer. His name is Mike Art. He's going to be up a little bit later when you call him to give some oral testimony and some written testimony. So I'm sure the goal of this project was to improve the traffic flow and increase the safety for pedestrians and cyclists, but I strongly believe that some of these design flaws, they missed the mark, and I would encourage you to really take a hard look at this, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Since apparently everything's coming towards the roundabout, so we'll probably put the picture back up there and have a more detailed discussion about it.
Excellent.
Thank you.
Thank you. Copies of my testimony?
Sure, absolutely. Hand them to Katie there, and she'll get them around to us, and she'll keep
write my
one.
testimony.
It's okay.
We've got it recorded.
It's on
We've got it
record.
recorded.
It's recorded.
Michael Ard and William Gifford, please.
You got our attention.
Good evening. I'm Michael Ard, and since you asked, I am from Oregon City. Originally, I graduated from Oregon City High School in 1990, although I'm not currently a resident. My parents are still residents of Oregon City. I did want to talk about a few things related to the roundabout tonight. One of the things that I wanted to mention is that a funding plan has not been worked out, and the cost implications of the roundabout are not understood by developers, the local community, the taxpayers, and the businesses of Oregon City. And that's a pretty significant concern at this point. I understand that some of those details are going to be worked out shortly, but we were pleased to hear that you're considering deferring this to a later decision when hopefully that information will be available. I want to talk a fair amount about safety and operations of the intersection, because there's been some testimony tonight regarding safety. And safety in roundabouts is a complicated subject. I personally am a fan of roundabouts, but I'm a fan in a limited way. I like single-lane roundabouts. I'm not a big fan of multi-lane roundabouts, and I'm particularly not a fan of multi-lane roundabouts with more than 4 points of entry and egress. And I want to share with you a little bit of information. This comes from the Highway Safety Manual, and it says, European experience suggests that single-lane modern roundabouts appear to increase safety for pedestrians and bicyclists. Now, I want you to notice the wording there. Single-lane roundabouts do that. What they do not indicate, and they specifically chose their wording so that they're not leading you astray, is that multi-lane roundabouts are in some way safer, because they're not. If you look at the crash modification factors from the Highway Safety Manual for urban roundabouts, the crash modification factor is 0.99. What that means is that on average for a roundabout, you can expect in an urban environment that you will see 99% of the crashes that occur at a signalized intersection after you make the change. That includes single-lane and multi-lane roundabouts in that statistic. For multi-lane roundabouts, you can expect the number of crashes to increase. When you're talking about severe injury and fatality crashes, the crash modification factor is lower, so it's hard to say what would happen at a multi-lane roundabout, but there are definitely concerns there, and there isn't enough data to know whether it would actually improve or make things worse with respect to those severe incidents. There are a number of concerns that I identified in my letter regarding unclear movements at the intersections. You can feel free to read through those or even ask me about them. I do want to point out some specific concerns about pedestrians and bicycles. So let's start, if you look at the Warner-Milne Road approach and imagine that somebody is on the south side of Warner-Milne Road and they want to cross to the north side. A car approaching from the roundabout is trying to exit onto Warner-Milne Road and stops right in advance of the crosswalk in the right lane. The presence of that car there obstructs the view of the left lane of traffic for that pedestrian. It's called a double threat situation. And what that means is that a pedestrian confidently crossing the road because traffic has stopped can get hit in the second lane. That's a particular problem for children who are shorter, for trucks that are larger vehicles that obstruct the view better, and for people in wheelchairs. So there is a hazard that occurs there, and it's at multiple locations. That's just one that can occur there. And certainly the incidence of severe injury collisions could go up if you're having double threat collisions that occur at this location. The fact that there are not pedestrian indications that tell people when it's safe to cross exacerbates that problem. I do want to wrap things up because I see that the red light is flashing. So I want to point out a little bit of good news. And I went out to look at the intersection of Central Point Road at Warner Parrott Road this evening and watched it during the evening peak hour. The reason is because when I did a traffic study for a developer down Central Point Road to the southwest, the analysis showed that that intersection is nearly failing right now. It's at level of service E, and if it got worse by 2 seconds, it would be level of service F. but it wasn't a calibrated analysis. It didn't take into account the way that the signal meters the flow of traffic through that area, and it didn't account for the way that drivers respond to individual intersections. And I was optimistic that the real world would look substantially better, and it did. The intersection's actually operating at level of service C right now, based on timing, how long the vehicles stop and wait there to make northbound left turns. You don't have an impending crisis here. The crash rate at the intersection is well within acceptable levels at I believe it's 0.26 for the last 5 years, and we typically consider it to be a high crash location of concern once it gets to 1 to 2 crashes per million entering vehicles. So it's about a quarter of that rate. I think that you have time to consider other options. I think that the fact that you've indicated such large swaths of land would be dedicated allows you the flexibility to consider things that you might not otherwise have done at a signalized intersection, like having a big median in there that allows people to make U-turns at the intersection and solves that central point problem, but keeps a signalized intersection there.
Well, there's no doubt we have things to look at with this.
Yeah.
So thank you very much. I appreciate that.
For him, go ahead.
I've got 2 questions for you. Where did you get the crash statistics that you mentioned it, but I missed it, about the incidents increasing?
As far as the highway safety manual, is that what you're referring to at the very beginning of my presentation? Yeah, that comes from the highway safety manual. Specifically, the 0.99 crash modification factor comes from table 14-3, which is the potential crash effects of converting a signalized intersection into a modern roundabout.
Okay, and the second question is, you said you went out there and observed today and then categorized the intersection of Central Point as a level C. Was that just from observations today?
That was from observations conducted today, yes. The way that we analyze intersections is typically that we count the number of vehicles going through the intersection, we know the lane configuration, we put things into the model, and it outputs what it projects the average delay will be for vehicles. But that's an estimate based on a mathematical model. The much more exact way to calibrate it is to go out and directly measure how much delay is occurring.
Right, but over a period of time, not just on a one-day.
Well, that's true, but the analysis models are also based on 1 day, 1 hour of observation. So what I did today is no less valid than the analysis methods that we normally use, and in fact is far more valid because it's directly based on real observations. Interestingly, I'll mention too that the delays varied anywhere from about 37 seconds at the high end to the least I saw was 1.6 for a car that frankly didn't even stop at the intersection before making a left turn.
Can you give us the license plate number? Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. William.
Mayor, City Commissioners, my name is William Gifford and I live in Oregon City. Not wearing any particular hat for these comments. Although I've heard a lot of the discussion about this, being a member of TAC, and of course I attend a lot of these meetings. The comment about beauty for the church's parking lot is significant. I like beauty, but I think that the central area of the proposed roundabout would be a great place for a statue, or some really significant artwork that could really enhance that rather dreary-looking intersection. I think, other than the church's property, I think that could use some sprucing up. The issue of safety, it's interesting to note that the traffic signal was invented in the state of Indiana. The state of Indiana is currently under process of trying to remove every traffic signal in the state and replace them all with roundabouts because of the significant safety factors, the flow of traffic, the reduced carbon footprint by cars not having to just stall and wait for the light to change. It greatly increases the free flow of commerce by moving things through an area like that. However, very seriously, I have, in addition to being an unabashed fan of roundabouts, and I also have driven extensively through Europe and have used a lot of roundabouts. I'm also passionate about business, and I am concerned about the impact on the business, specifically of the Plaid Pantry there. it seems to me as though, and I think that this was also brought forth in the TAC meetings, by moving the center of that roundabout more specifically towards the school property, that it could eliminate a lot of the, or at least ameliorate a good deal of the impact on that property. And I think with a more attractive intersection, that could enhance that particular property by improving the ingress and egress of to that property. In short, I'm really bullish on roundabouts, as you know, but I think that we have to be sensitive to the business community, and I think that we have to be careful about the aesthetics of this. And I realize that this is just a concept plan. We still have a lot of planning to do, that this is not a done deal. But I certainly wouldn't want the concept of a roundabout to in any way impede this this plan of this corridor.
Thank you.
I think I have another 3 or 4 minutes, so I could probably tell some funny stories, but I'll stop.
All right, thank you.
Yes, you will. Now there'll be time for commission discussion. Commissioner Smith.
Do we need to close the public hearing?
Yeah, we'll close it.
As far as the plan is concerned, I support the plan. I do have the similar concerns about the roundabout, and that have already been brought up tonight. I appreciate the comments from Ms. Savage and other people that spoke about that particular location. I am concerned definitely about the impact on the business, that specific business, but also all the properties really on that corner. I agree to some degree with the Planning Commission's recommendations. However, moving the roundabout north, I don't know if that's a possibility that really resolves some of the concerns that we would have. I think in general, I think roundabouts are a good thing. This is kind of a different piece because of so many roads coming into one place. And I grew up in that neighborhood, walked to Plaid Pantry every day, almost every day, either that one or the Lynn Avenue one. And I think I actually walked there when the barn was still there, and so I remember it very well. But I think, living in Oregon City your entire life, it seems like just yesterday that road was realigned and that all these property owners lost property. And it seems like it wasn't just yesterday, but it seems like it was. So I think there needs to be definitely consideration for the fact that projects have happened at this exact intersection where these property owners have already had to go through this. And so I think we need to consider that. Because of the logistics of that particular parking lot, it's really difficult. And I think we all acknowledge how difficult it is to plan this intersection. So I'd like to see us work a little bit more on that. But at the same time, I think our Public Works Director stated that pretty clearly. We don't have funding for this. It's a plan. This is not something that I think any of us expect to happen anytime soon at all. But I think as we, as a city, move forward, hopefully, we don't own. The city hasn't purchased the Mount Pleasant site yet. That's definitely a consideration for a future police department site. So there, in terms of moving the roundabout, if the city owns the Mount Pleasant site, that gives us some flexibility. Whether or not that helps solve all the problems we're talking about tonight, I don't know. I don't think it would, but so I see this this particular piece being a dialogue that does definitely need to continue. And I don't know if that needs to hold up the entire comprehensive plan for a long period of time, but there might be a way that we can make the property owners and the neighborhood feel a little bit more at ease that that's not something that's going to happen tomorrow, but that dialogue continues so we can make a plan that we can all appreciate.
I've got, I guess, one major comment. Actually, the flow here disturbs me a great deal. I was raised in a neighborhood very close to Gleason and 39th, which has had a roundabout there way back in the trolley days.
Mm-hmm.
And when I was a kid, it was extremely dangerous, and I don't recall if it was a one-lane roundabout or if it was designed this way. They had changed it so that the lane indicating a right-hand turn was only for a right turn, and there was only one through lane going through. I would suggest you'd look at that particular intersection, what triggered the changes there, but I think it is in fact a far safer intersection than it was when I was younger. So you might want to look at that specific, and Gleason and 39th, in Portland. And my understanding is when they went to the design of a right turn only lane, their accident rates dropped dramatically. It'll eliminate one of the two through lanes, and it would actually shrink the roundabout. So some of the concerns from the property owners might be reduced. With one lane, then you're going to mix your right turns and throughs together, and I don't know how that stands out, but I would look at that one intersection specifically because they made a major change on that for safety reasons.
This one, like the one that you're talking about, is a little bit of a hybrid. It's not a complete two-lane. There's a couple legs of the roundabout that are single lane. But I hear what you're saying, and we would definitely look at that. The other thing is the one on Gleason is a little unique in that there's stop signs controlled.
That's correct.
Stop the traffic before they enter the circle, and this one here is based on a more of a yield controlled kind of intersection. The other thing with pedestrian traffic is some of the, I mean, again, this is a concept, but one of the suggestions was that, as the pedestrian, if the pedestrian traffic, if it makes sense based on the amount of traffic and the concerns for safety, a lot of the roundabouts now are going to especially with the new rapid flashing beacons, on each leg of the intersection, you have that opportunity as a pedestrian to utilize it.
So is that the intention here?
It's been included in the estimate of the cost, but we haven't. I mean, it's fairly conceptual in design. Let's just say that. And one of the things that we, when we chose this corridor, you remember this wasn't a budgeted project, right? So we didn't have a lot of budget to throw at this study. So a detailed analysis of the justification for a roundabout is something that we would still want to go through, make sure that that's the right solution. We've heard a lot of community feedback that's positive about roundabouts. It's also shown as a roundabout in our transportation system plan. So we're following that lead, but we also have the ability to perform an analysis that suggests that would confirm or not that the roundabout is the only and the best and the safest solution for that particular intersection. So that quote to do that work was fairly high, and we didn't want to bust our budget to get there, but that would be something that we would pursue before we take the concept any further.
I did want to mention one thing that somebody alluded to in terms of the current traffic. There's a lot of development occurring on Central Point Road. The use of that facility there is going to increase dramatically. I'm surprised that there are so few accident statistics there, because I moved about a year ago off of Central Point Road. People are extremely polite. I mean, they don't block the intersections normally, so you're able to get out and through into the Central Point Road, which is the biggest headache, I think. But I don't feel comfortable at any point going into that intersection to make the turn onto Central Point, because you have to do lane maneuvering, and you got the lights on, and you don't know if you got 2 green arrows and you're able to make the turn, or what it is. It's very, very complicated with the signal system to access Central Point Road. Extremely complicated. So I know that much about it. So, I mean, I think considering a roundabout is a great idea. As I say, I have some concerns, and the thing I brought up would actually reduce the footprint. Any other questions?
Carol was next.
Yes. Well, I was going to leave the roundabout to the end, but maybe I'll just start with that. So it actually came from the TSB plan, right? That's where this came from.
All right, transportation system plan. It's actually been on the books for a long time as a roundabout, but we carried that forward into the transportation system plan.
Because I know a lot of people were a little bit surprised with that. They kind of wanted to know where that came from. So that's good information to know. It came from the TSP plan. That intersection, when we moved here in '96, it took me a while to figure out what was what. There's a lot of things going on there. But I think people have, now that I'm used to it, people it works them out a little bit. But the plan as a whole, I think, is very good. It's important to have a plan so as development occurs, it can be continuous and it has flow and it makes sense and it connects everything. So I think that's very important. We live on that corridor, and then we have commercial property on the other corridor, 7th Street corridor, which had a plan, which was realized, and I feel it's much safer. And as development occurs, it follows that plan. So I think having a plan is very important. This corridor did not have a plan. And there's a lot of disconnected sidewalks and other things that, as development occurs, can be done in a unified manner that makes sense. So I think having a plan is very important. So good work on that. The Planning Commission's adjustments to the plan, I think, are great. I think they make a lot of sense. So again, that public feedback and changes to the plan and input's very important to make sure it's something that we can all live with.
Could I interrupt you a moment?
Yes.
Was your comments on the roundabout?
Yes.
I'll come back to you since we have the roundabout in.
Okay, I was going to go back to the roundabout one more time.
Go ahead.
Okay, go ahead and go back to the roundabout one more time. And then
We're
we'll
going
go
roundabout to the roundabout.
Uh-huh.
The 2-lane traffic circle does really concern me too, and also as a property owner, that does concern me too, infringing upon people's property. And I would like there to be some flexibility in the plan to consider other options for that intersection, other concepts that might, be good. I know that's a big area of growth, Central Point, and having the South End concept plan. I think planning for the future is very important. But not a fan of the 2-lane traffic circle. That would be confusing for me.
I would agree. The plan itself is good. The roundabout has some issues that need to be worked on. I don't think a business should have to suffer because of this roundabout that we want to put in. And it does look very confusing. So I know that we're going to continue this conversation and we're going to bring it back. So I'm looking forward to what it looks like when you bring it back.
Any more comments? Yours on the roundabout too? Yes, go ahead if you would. I'll come back to, I think Carol Paul had other things to say. Oh, you did? Oh, okay.
Okay, this may sound strange coming from me, but I am a fan of roundabouts. But considering my stance on the Dunes Drive roundabout, you may not think that.
No, I think most of us agree with you on that.
But I agree with what I think I'm hearing from the rest of the commissioners in that I don't like the way that this is taking up private property and think that there's another way to address it. And I also think that a 1-lane roundabout would be much more appropriate, so.
Okay, do I have a motion to continue?
Move to continue
15, October 15th.
to October 15th, 14-1013.
Second.
Seconded by Commissioner Roth. The vote, please. Unanimous. So,
Thank you,
can all come
guys.
back again if you want to.
Yeah. Yeah.
Thank you all for your input.
Thank you very much.
Is that, no, can we change that?
Wait.
I was going to suggest that the council might want to consider continuing it longer. Do we need a date certain?
You do. If you
Yeah.
Because there's a lot that's been said here tonight, and for us to come back with something that's,
I mean, there's, yeah.
if you really want us to do what I think you're wanting us to do, we need more time to do it.
Yeah.
Katie, can you look at the calendar if they need a date certain and give us one that's, John, that you think would be more?
So we may have to move the date, you guys, so hang on.
Hang on. Yeah,
The next month is November 19th. Do you want 2 months, or what are you thinking?
Yeah, let's do 2 months. I think we can, I'll
When
work
does
with Wallace. and
when does
DPS.
the master plan come to us?
The master plan?
For
You're
the-
going to be done with it in one night, right?
I mean, for the,
So the first hearing for the master
Oh,
plan
okay.
is October 15th for Orlando Falls. Then you would be on November 5th. And then if you needed a third one, it'd be on November 19th.
So I think it's going to take us some time. That's
Oh, I
finishing.
agree. Yeah, we advertised 3, but
Yeah.
on the 19th, hopefully it would be wrapping up.
Okay.
Would the commission prefer to bring this back to a work session first, or do you want to come right back to a public meeting?
I prefer work session.
Yeah, I think it'd be a good idea.
Okay.
So
Work
let's-
session in
the work-
November.
How about, no, I'm going to say the first work session in, well, the only
November.
work session in December. Is that,
December would be the 9th.
say that again?
In December, it would be the 9th, December 9th.
Yeah, I like that better.
And then the ordinance, then you'll have to get a date certain for that. You're looking at January now, and you're probably looking at the second January meeting.
I would say probably.
So
We could-
January 21st.
We could have a
is-
special work session. We've done that before.
Part of our deal is, yeah, I'm hearing concepts that we haven't developed. I'm hearing possibility of the justification of a little bit more study time. So
Yeah.
we probably need to work through an amendment with our consultants. And yeah, I think a little more time would be better. So that
But that's
December.
kind of just, for me, it was just the roundabout. The rest of
No,
the plan was
Yeah,
good
I
with
just-
me, so I don't know, I don't want to hold up the rest of the plan if there's something out there.
Well, I don't see the rest of the plan changing much, and nor
Okay.
do I see us being able to implement in that time
Okay.
frame either. So,
All right.
it's really something that we can take our time with.
Okay.
So
perfect.
so we're
what do we
thinking a
need to do?
December 9th work session and a January 21st continuance? Is that what I'm hearing?
I guess what you're doing is reconsidering your motion and then substituting these dates.
Yeah. Recognizing it's a different commission they'll be
That's
looking
what
at.
I'm
Yes,
wondering
right.
about. We've got two
And a
commissions.
different council.
Right,
Pardon me?
That's right.
right.
Oh, that's true.
But we'll have a work session with the, oh, no, we won't.
Well, that's why I'm suggesting a special work session.
She has a question.
Yes, ma'am.
I have a question. Now I'm confused. When is the next meeting?
Yeah, that's what
That's what
we're
we're trying
trying
to
to,
do.
that's
Figure
what
that
we're
out,
working
yeah.
on, Betty.
The staff felt they need more time to give us some alternatives. And so doing it at the next one was
It
problematic. And now
yeah.
we're trying to figure out what the best time is.
So if we did a special work session in the end of November, is that an option, or do we want to? Yeah. I
Yes.
think-
You're going to have to have a first and second reading.
Yeah,
But we're
so-
going to have a work session before that,
Yeah.
so.
Yeah, let's try for a work session in November, not the regular work session. We could do it before or after meeting like we did tonight. We'll just have to schedule that.
That would be my preferences, because you're already going to be here, all
Right.
of you, and we're getting close to the holidays then, so my preference would be that we try to do your work session like we did tonight with the sewer rates, and have it a work session on the same night that you're going to have a council meeting, and if you have to postpone a decision, then
We can do that.
So
that's
can we
possible.
give the folks out here a date that we're going to hold this work session on?
Meeting in November, second regular meeting in November.
Okay, but let me make sure we don't have urban renewal. Do you know if any urban renewal stuff?
Schedule.
In November?
Yeah.
Personally, I think it
We've got,
probably.
When is the Cove project coming up again?
We have a continuance until January.
Until January, yes. We've got EID coming up first part of November.
Yeah.
It's
For the first meeting in November.
The first reading, November, yeah, for the first meeting.
So I don't show anything on the second one, so that would be November 19th. So that sounds like a good.
It's the work session.
Right, but we were going to do a special work session
work
before the
session.
regular
Same night as
city
the
commission
meeting.
meeting, same as we did tonight, so that would be November 19th.
And that gives us time for a second reading.
November
We wouldn't-
19th.
But we wouldn't actually read that night, or we could.
We could.
We could, just like we
But
did
you may
tonight.
not want to
Well-
because there's so much going on.
Yeah.
Okay, so what we know is the next meeting that they won't be making a vote on, but will be discussed as November 19th.
But you-
We need to really make a specific,
Yeah.
a date for
We have to have
the
a date
ordinance reading.
certain.
And I recommend the second meeting in January, because as a realistically, you're going to be discussing concepts in late November. It's going to take time to put them into word order, and you're probably not going to have a second meeting in December.
Unless we want.
You can also approve the plan and exempt the roundabout.
Okay.
That's another option you can do.
Well, that's what I was thinking.
Yeah, I wanna
because
consider that
my
one.
my sticking point is the roundabout. The rest of the plan is fine with me. So I don't know. Do you want me to amend the motion to say move forward with the plan, accept?
Reconsider and substitute. So get the dates down, and I'll help you with the wording.
Okay.
So
Okay.
I just hope we have some second meeting in December because I have something on the agenda for that.
Oh my God.
It's time sensitive.
Well, we're working on the roundabout right now. So
Can we do?
give me some dates.
Can we do the first and second meeting in December for the reading of the ordinance?
Yes.
Assuming we have, I mean, we're going to.
All you have to do is continue to a first reading. You don't have to have a second reading date.
No. So
Question. Is it possible to do a first reading tonight excluding the roundabout?
sure.
I'd have to amend, I'd have to reread and pull that stuff out.
Yeah,
No,
so that's
as
too
a practical
complicated.
matter, no.
No. Okay.
So we'll continue this hearing to the date certain of December 3rd, 2014.
Isn't that what I said?
No.
Oh.
It was so long
You
ago,
said
I don't
November
remember.
19th. Okay.
There's going to be a work session on November 19th.
November
But we're
19th is.
continuing the public hearing with the record open to the date certain of December 3rd, 2014.
Maybe we should have
Which,
taken a
which
break.
means we will take action on the second reading should we pass the first reading
On the 17th.
on the 17th of December. Okay.
So I have to amend my.
Amend the motion, or, sorry, reconsider the motion, and to set the work session date for November 19, is that right?
Mm-hmm.
And then set the next, the first reading of the ordinance. You don't have to set a second reading right now.
Right.
For the
December
3rd?
3rd.
3rd of December. That's all you need to do right now.
Okay, I want to move to
So
approve what Mr. Sullivan just said.
Well, just to clarify, the roundabout will not be part of that ordinance.
We're going to make that decision
Well,
during the work session.
Yeah,
Okay.
it could be.
Okay.
That'll be a
Okay.
discussion
That's fine.
afterwards.
That's fine.
So the 19th, everybody. That's when we want to see you back.
And that's a work session. We won't be voting on the 19th.
Oh, you can come back before then.
Yeah, you can.
You're welcome anytime.
But now we have a motion on the floor, so do we have to vote?
Yes, we do.
Okay.
And we have a motion
Yes,
made,
second by-
a second for the continuance to
Kathy
a
Roth.
specific date.
Okay, so it was moved by Betty and seconded by Kathy
Kathy.
Roth.
Yes.
Whoa, that was a hard one. Thanks, you guys,
Thank you
for
very
sticking
much.
around.
We got a lot more if you want to stay.
Thank you very much.
I
Maybe we
presume
should
the
take a
next item.
5-minute break.
Let's do
Yeah, I
the
would-
let's do the first next ordinance as a second reading,
Yeah.
unless somebody's
Thank
had a
you.
major change of heart. So let's go ahead with the second reading of the vacating the existing 26 foot wide public.
Wait, you're missing, I think you're missing an agenda item, I'm sorry.
Oh, excuse me.
Here. Oregon City
Sign
sign
code
code.
update. You're on the wrong page.
I'm on the wrong page.
Yeah.
Let's take a break.
Yeah.
For 10 minutes.
Oh, wait. Are we?
Hold it. Oh, no, I'm, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Recess.
That'll, of course, go to our, oops. Shall we go ahead and take care of this without Tony Costa?
Yeah, I think so. Well, I move to continue.
We're waiting.
Thanks, John.
Just to comment, the community development director was working with citizens of the public who had commented. Excellent.
I know,
customer
he was doing his job.
Tony can defend himself.
Spend this whole break.
You need a staff report? What are we doing here? Sign code. We are asking that the City Commission take any testimony from any interested party who wishes to testify tonight on the sign code, and then continue with the public record open to the date certain of February 4th, 2015 for the next City Commission meeting. We've been working on, we've completed the sign, historic sign inventory of the existing downtown. There were some additional concerns raised by the Planning Commission. We just ran into a timing issue with Blue Heron coming in at the same time as the sign code, and we need to dedicate some significant time to finishing up the sign code at the Planning Commission level, so that pushed all these dates out and then allowed a work session to come back in front of the City Commission. So that's the request for
So it's
such
just basically you're making a
continuance.
request just for public comment. If anybody wants to comment at this time, we're not taking any action.
We are we're just continuing it to the date certain of February 4th, 2015.
Yes. Before I open the public hearing, Commissioner Roth has a question.
And it may be in here, I just didn't have time to research it, but there seem to be a lot of things going on downtown, and I'm not sure if they're signs or not, or those new things that are up.
That's art.
That's art. They're very pretty. But it seems like there's a lot going on.
Yeah.
And is the sign code going to include all of these things that are protruding all over the place?
I'm not sure how you want to answer that one.
Which protruding thing?
The lamp only.
Can I follow up with you and we can talk about, to make sure that I know exactly what we're
Okay,
what
we'll
we're
take a walk
discussing?
later.
Jonathan may have some
Yeah.
insight on the protruding.
He has insight, but
That was a bad word, I'm sorry.
The question, I think, is a different one. These are art pieces,
Yes.
and I don't know we'd ever want to get those under the sign code. We
No,
might want to.
We treat if it's in the public right away.
What's on the agenda right now
I
is a
turn it over to
continuance.
John Lewis.
Yeah, continue.
Oh, you want to turn it over to me?
I don't like to look at Ed Sullivan under these conditions. I really don't like to look at Ed Sullivan. under
Ed
these
Sullivan says we have to continue.
No, it's not that. It is so complex.
Yes.
Art, yeah.
It is
What?
complex.
That's very.
It's what my concern is. We're just getting a lot of visual. I don't like a lot of stuff going on in my face.
Those are the only art pieces that we put there that I actually understood. I didn't understand anything before that one.
So Jonathan,
Okay, Jonathan, can you explain this?
It's
I don't know.
protrusions.
I feel like I've made a total fool of myself.
Commissioner, you definitely didn't make
No.
a voice of it. And I think Tony mentioned he would talk with you offline if you want, or just continue with the agenda, and that way we can.
Okay, that's
through it.
fine. It's just
In any case, it is all his fault.
it is. They're very pretty. Don't get me wrong on that.
So with that,
Well, he did request to speak. Are you opening the public?
on
Or what
the
do we-
sign code?
Yes.
Yes. Just a minute. Kathy had the question. She's posed her question, and
I'm gonna talk
she'll
with Tony.
talk offline.
Right, and I think when we come in for the work session, we've set up ways to deal with how we're going to address art in the future, how we're going to address funerals in the future, how we're addressing signs and whatnot in the right of way. So when we have that work session, we'll be able to go into a lot of detail, but we can follow up and I can get an idea and see how we would address that under the new code.
Okay, thanks.
With that, we'll open the public hearing for the discussion on the sign code update. Jonathan Stone. 3 minutes, whether you live in Oregon City or not, who you are.
Good evening, Jonathan Stone, Executive Director of Main Street, Oregon City, and resident of Oregon City. I'm not really going to comment on the sign code specifically, more just sort of a plea to let's wrap this up, because the first day of my job, October 14th last year, was my first meeting, was a sign code Citizens Advisory Team meeting, and so we're coming up on a year anniversary. And I for me working with downtown, and I'm hearing February is the next date. So I know there's a lot of uncertainty with downtown businesses in terms of how this is going to affect them. And if we could just sort of wrap it up as quickly as possible, that's all I ask.
Haven't you had experience working with governments before?
I'm from the private sector. So.
Yeah, we feel your pain.
Anyways, that is my comment. In terms of any other comments with respect to the specifics of the sign code, I'll reserve for a later public hearing. So
thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Great.
With nobody else, we'll close the public hearing. Do we have a motion? Do we need a motion specific?
Motion to continue
February 4, 2015.
to February 4th, 2015.
I second that.
Vote, please. Unanimous, and some of us will be here.
There you go.
Yes, we will.
And then the next piece is the sanitary sewer rates. We have a couple of resolution alternatives on our list. Leaving it to John Lewis.
Thank you, Mayor. So yes, before you is resolution number 14-17, and we scrambled a little bit between the work session and this regular meeting to create resolution 14A and 14B. Appreciate the discussion that we had at the work session. It was helpful for us to kind of hear your concerns, and but at the same time, we wanted to make sure that we were giving you the best information that we could. So again, it feels like this is a repeat, but you've seen this information before. We've reduced the number of slides so that it's not too repetitive, and I'm going to turn it over to John Ghilarducci to go ahead and present what he had, and then we changed things obviously, and so we'll bring that forward in paper copy, and Katie's got those for the people in the audience to be able to review as well. So with that, John, you want to proceed?
Some very brief background on utility rate basics and the revenue requirement, a summary of our key assumptions, and then we'll get right to the results. What we're trying to do with a rate study of any kind is establish the amount of revenue that we need to sustain the system and make sure that it is financially healthy. The rates are intended to recover those costs of providing that service, and other objectives, stable revenues, and in this case, addressing the moratorium and getting the capital projects built that are needed to release that moratorium. The revenue requirement is the major result of a study like this. It is the determination of the amount of revenue needed from rates to meet all the financial obligations of the utility. In order to do that type of analysis, we need to look at operating costs in the form of the operating budget, capital costs, and fiscal policies such as meeting minimum target reserve balances. All of those feed into the determination of that amount of revenue needed from rates. And then we forecast any rate increases that might be necessary to provide enough revenue to meet those obligations. Our financial forecast, you'll see built into our numbers inclusion of key assumptions like these. The model is built for a 10-year period. The slides you'll see here go out through 2020. We're assuming customer growth of about 0.5% a year. All the escalation factors you see there are included in individual line items in our expense forecasts. And we've assumed a 60-day operating reserve so that there will be a cushion in the fund to meet any emergencies. The operating budget for the current fiscal year of fiscal year 2015 is about just under $6 million, $5.9 million. There's existing debt service on the books, sewer related, of a little over $500,000. That will be paid off in fiscal year 2019. The capital costs that you saw Jim describe earlier that are in the master plan total about $12 million for the period through 2020. There are additional after that, but they don't significantly impact the rates. That $12 million will be funded by a combination of rate revenues and system development charges for the growth-related portions of those projects. So all told, in order to meet those different obligations, what you're looking at is a stack bar graph showing expenditures in the stacked bars. The yellow portion of that stack bar chart is the rate-funded CIP. So those are the capital projects. The dark line is rate revenue at existing rates. So if there's no rate increase, the city will be unable to meet these needs over that study period. In order to meet those obligations, we're proposing a rate increase of a little under $4 for a single-family residence in the current fiscal year, and then a second nearly $4 increase in fiscal year 2016. Once the city gets over that hump, then inflationary increases are all that's required after that of about 3% per year. So a summary of those recommendations: the single family, and this is just the collection portion of the rate, that would take effect October 1st and would go from the current $21.10 to the $24.90 you see there, and then the second increase to $28.63. That would apply to all single family residences, and for commercial properties, every 1,000 cubic feet of water usage, those are the rates that would apply.
I guess the other piece to that is that we're proposing a 3% rate increase effective July 1 and every year thereafter to keep up with inflation. There we go.
Cost escalation.
Cost escalation. So this was what we had intended to bring when we put the agenda together. After the work session, we did do some work, but we were suggesting that you do some deliberation, Ed. I'm not sure if there's an opportunity to, if there's specific timing on this, but we were thinking that maybe you should hear from some of the public comment first, and then look at, and then based on that, kind of consider whether or not we need to look at something different.
Resolution, so you've got more at play.
We had a fair discussion of the study session that preceded this, and this is the resolution you see is the resolution that is before us, but there's also discussion whether we could stretch this to a three-year increase instead of a 2-year increase. So depending on how the vote proceeds on the first resolution, if it does not pass, we might be looking at a second resolution. So those are both before us here. We may not look at the second option. We couldn't make a decision, of course, at a study session. We can only make a decision at a commission meeting. So we'll call it an option B should the first resolution not pass. And do we have any comments from the commissioners before we open the public hearing?
The one that you guys went back in between, what was the first year percentage?
In the revised version?
The revised version.
17%.
So you only took it down 1%.
Yeah, because of the way the model's structured so that we can meet the moratorium requirements we have
So
to.
you're meeting
we have to do something pretty
basically the
significant up front.
compounding of the interest rate and under one and under the other.
Correct.
So you couldn't take it down to 15. That was an option.
Well, the more we push to try and take things down, the more we delay the projects, and we run into
Right.
problems with the moratorium.
Right.
So we did extend so that in year, I think it was, we did a 17,
17.6.
17,
So there's some
13.
savings there. It's not as much as we would like to do, but
Yeah.
still meet our requirements.
One thing I do want to sort of correct. He said 3%. It actually reads no more than 3%. And why this is, I think, an important piece here. The commission passed a resolution in conjunction with the increase in the Tri-City sewer rate fee, the resolution that those monies would go back in specifically to wastewater. Those fees, although they're being collected, there's not an absolute guarantee we'll be able to get those fees because it is currently in the courts. And it may be that 2 or 3 years hence, depending on what the right-of-way fees that coming in are, it may not be necessary to actually do the full 3% to keep up with our concerns about the moratorium. And so, but the resolution as written, I think, gives us that kind of flexibility because we're saying no more than 3%.
No more, yeah.
That's an excellent point, Mayor, because then we could make the assessment in the third year of whether we need to do the whole 3% or have
Right.
a lesser inflationary impact.
Right. So we have, we're going to go ahead into public comment. I'll open the public hearing and calling forth William Gifford and then Graham Peterson. Graham, haven't seen you for a while. Welcome back. William, we see you all the time.
I used to be that kid.
Anyway, it's William Gifford first.
William Gifford, live in Oregon City. Mr. Mayor and City Commissioners, I really believe that we are in the mess that we're in right now because of previous administrations kicking the can down the road.
Oh, sure.
And certainly not paying their way as they went and planning for the future. And I don't want us to be caught in that. That said, I have some concerns about this resolution. This is not a public hearing, is it? Not per se.
Public comment.
Public comments. One is the amount of time that the public has had to study this issue. The sewer plan is one thing, but the rates I consider as a separate issue, and I'm not convinced that that the entire community, both citizens and business communities, have had an opportunity to study this and be able to make meaningful comments. Such things as what just came up tonight, the possibility of extending this to a 3-year, the consideration of no more than 3%. Why couldn't it be no more than 17%? There are just so many factors that I'm concerned that we might be rushing into this a little bit. I know, I remember my first comments were don't kick it down the road, but on the other hand, I think, what have we had, 2 weeks to even know about this? About the specifics of what the resolution was about. I had another question that if we are proposing that the rates would increase on October 1st and then again on July 1st, I mean that's only 9 months or so. Why wouldn't you make it October 1st and October 1st and October 1st and spread it that way? I don't know why we have that first year is so compressed. The other concern that I have, I'm going to take a couple of extra seconds just because I didn't take them last time I was here. I know that a major part of our concern of raising these rates, and I understand that they have to be raised, has to do with the moratorium, and the moratorium is a significant impact to our business as well as our residential communities. But it's my understanding that there's not that much infill that is being delayed because of the moratorium. And I'm not saying that we should stretch that moratorium out any farther than we want it to be fixed. We definitely want it to be fixed, but it seems to me as though raising rates so quickly without as much public input as we have had over such a short period of time, especially compressing that first year, I just think that this resolution needs further study and further opportunities for more intelligent public comments than I can make. That's my thoughts.
Mr. Peterson.
Graham Peterson, Oregon City. So I have a similar concern about the amount of time, not related to the plan, but related to the rates. I thought we had pretty good public engagement on the plan side of things, and I think those facts are hard to argue. But it seems the rate issue has been kind of thrown in front of us, and William addressed that pretty well, so I won't get into details on that. I also, at the same time, think having a moratorium specifically by Willamette Falls Hospital is a major concern for me, that being a major employer for our city. So another part of this that would make me feel more comfortable with whatever rate increases we look at is some prioritization of where we're going to eliminate these bottlenecks or moratoriums. And specifically, I'd like you guys to look at that area being maybe priority one. That's your policy judgment, but that would be something I would feel a lot better about supporting some rate increases if I knew that that was priority one. So those are my comments. Thank you.
If I can take a couple of his seconds, because he's still got a green light on here.
Ask him.
You can.
Referring to the priority of the hospital, I also want to remind you that the hospital has a master plan in the works.
Yep.
And I would certainly like that prioritization of the sewer issues to be taken into consideration with that master plan. As a matter of fact, Russ Reinhardt is going to be our guest speaker at the Oregon City Business Alliance this month, and he is going to be presenting the Providence Willamette Falls Hospital's master plan. So I would certainly hope that you take that into consideration when you're prioritizing the sewer projects as well.
That'll close the public hearing. Do you want to talk about prioritization?
Well, just a little bit. Yeah, I think we were aware of the master plan. They haven't actually called us to ask us to participate, but we are aware that they have a master plan. We've talked to them about our priority, and that. In fact, we've already hired a consultant to work on one segment, which is down at the very bottom near Main Street. So we're already wanting to move quickly on these, and Division Street and the pipeline segments up near the hospital are our number one priority. So we're thinking in those terms as well. So, and we do have a priority. We were pushing that project and a couple others up to try and get those, moving within the first year. This may have a small impact. This, if we were to do something other than what we're planning to recommend, but we don't think it's going to be a large impact on the timing of those projects.
Mr. Roth.
I have a question. Mr. Kiefer brought up the infill, and how many acres of the 645 are available for infill?
We've provided that information. I don't know if Alita do you remember that, Alita, by any chance? It's there's not it's a small percentage. I want to say less than 10%.
Okay, I didn't remember it. So okay.
Yeah, and the biggest parcel I think is the Mount Pleasant school site.
Okay, thank you.
My assumption is you look at those rates very carefully and determine what you require to actually get us out of the moratoriums, and that was the basis of it. Stretching it out means basically you're stretching it out, whether we go for October, July, or whatever. We, I think, all felt that this was really presented to us. This is a very important piece that we needed to get forward. It's not only a case of handling potential limited new development, it's that we're really beyond our capacity right now. And so we're dealing with basically, I mean,
We could have an overflow this winter.
Yeah. These are public safety issues. They really are. And while we probably wouldn't rank it as great in terms of some of the police services and fire services that we have, and of course we don't pay for those fire services for the city, the fact is that is a public health issue. And my preference is not to extend this any further in terms of the timing. Do we have any motion on the resolution that is presented to us? Oh, excuse me. Go ahead, Rocky.
I appreciate the discussion about the two options and concerns that were brought up, but in seeing it on paper, there's not a lot of difference. And I'm not a math person, but I think the biggest, between 10 and 30 cents in each of the years, which to me is not a major difference when you can be wrapping this up in 2 years. So I definitely would like to see us stick with the original proposed resolution. And I appreciate the concern in terms of the public input. I also think that the mayor brought up an important point as well. I personally don't want to see us wait much longer with this, and if the commission as a whole feels like this is something that needs to be discussed at another meeting, so to give more public input, I guess I'm open to that. But I would be supportive of moving forward with this evening.
Commissioner Mum.
I'm probably the biggest holdup, of course, but I don't like the rate, 18 or 17%. So I do think that timing is important. I understand the moratorium is important. I just think that we should have more communication with our business partners, because I think even though it's $4 more per household, it could impact our business fellows like 40 or 50 or 60, $100 a month more. I don't know. I just don't think that we've considered that possibility.
Commissioner Roth.
Okay, one more thing I wanted to make sure we addressed is this letter that came from Craig Danielson.
Yes.
And I totally agree with what he's saying here in that we should eliminate those expiration dates on SDC credits. We just went through that with the property here on 7th and Washington running into a problem, and I totally agree with what he's saying here. So I think we need to look
That's
at
the next agenda item.
That's the next one.
Oh, sorry.
You're on the rate discussion. SDCs come
Yeah.
next. Yeah.
Okay, thanks.
I'll let you repeat yourself then.
Okay, thank you. All right.
Yes.
Gifford again. If these rate increases are to ameliorate the situation specifically because of the moratorium, and once those sewer lines are repaired, will the rates ever drop?
No.
Well,
Mayor,
no more than 3% could be a negative percentage. But
That's
Mayor and Commissioners, I'd be happy to answer that question if you'd like. And I do have a quick comment. So I know I have a great deal of respect for the two gentlemen that just spoke, just outside of the meeting here. We had a I'm not going to say however, and that stands, my friends. We just had a work session that was about 40 minutes where we talked about a lot of the issues, and I would like to clarify a couple of points related to that. And one is, but I did want to clarify in terms of why the compression, why October 1 versus July 1. There is a process that we followed for that. Our typical rate increase would have been July 1, so we had 0 rate increase for July 1, this prior July 1. And
Did you do 3%?
Nope. We did 0% rate increase, and we had discussed this a little bit, as if you recall. Well, a lot of stuff's been thrown at you, but as we talked about the moratorium, we've had several public meetings about the moratorium, and staff made a conscious decision, but working with you, to say, we don't want to alert anybody above and beyond what might end up happening. So we could have thrown out numbers at the time. We could have asked for something in July, but what we said at the time was we would like to have a clear understanding of what the least impact that we could have based on this major problem that we have. William just asked a question which is very important, which I think we've talked about the moratorium, and the mayor made an excellent point. There's a health and safety issue, and we could be subject to liabilities and fines from the DEQ.
Oh,
We could be subject from
absolutely.
additional lawsuits. We talked about our sewer claims of $560,000. That was over several years. I'm going to split hairs on that. But what we're talking about is a health and safety issue and having a complete system. The thing that's not as well discussed, because the moratorium is the emergency part, where we have a lot of pressure and state laws associated with that, and we can't identify those problems and then not do anything about it, or we're putting ourselves at serious legal risk when the home builders say you have to build, and we say, So just wanted to clarify that is a major component that we've been talking about. You recall in the discussion that we had in the work session, as soon as we're done taking care of the moratorium issues, we're jumping right into I&I and continuing to the program. And that's why, although we would like to look at some bonding issues and stretching things out, our system, in order to maintain it, requires an immediate and responsive, intentional effort in the beginning. That's the first 2 years. The benefit to our customers ultimately down the road is that after those 2 years, years 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, we're looking at inflationary charges only. So if we do defer this rate increase, in the long run, all of the customers are going to pay more. But when we didn't implement anything on July 1, we did that purposefully, and we postponed it to October 1st because we didn't want to jump the gun. And so normally we'd always come to you in July 1, but in this case, we're not working under normal circumstances. We're working under a moratorium situation. And it is a public health and safety issue. But I didn't want to address William's question to say that once the moratorium's done, you're going to have a working, functional system with inflationary-only increases for quite a while, and that's going to be a nice position to be in that will help the public on the health and safety issues, and in the long run, reduce their rates, reduce their rate increases that could happen.
I'm going to follow that up by a comment, too. The sewer rates will be larger after the moratorium, but we've had these issues with inflow and infiltration for years. We have not been able to keep up with them. It'll enable us to move forward at a more rapid rate on dealing with those particular issues. So it is too bad we had kicked and it's not only this administration too. I mean, this administration has been in place for several years, and we still have the 0% increases. So we've had this issue over. We're responsible for it. This commission is responsible for it and the failure. But in any case, does anyone want to put forward a motion on the current resolution that's before us?
I will move to approve Resolution 14-17, sanitary sewer rate increases.
That's the A version, right?
Yes, A
That's
version.
the one that was presented to us here, yeah. It's been moved by Commissioner Smith, second by Commissioner Pauly. Vote, please. 3 yeses and 2 noes. With that, the resolution passes. Okay, going on to the next item. That being the one that the letter referred to, I believe. Ordinance for introduction, amending Chapter 1320, System Development Charge for Capital Improvements related to SDC credits for reductions
Oh, yes.
on developments.
Yes. We're already it's exhausting.
Welcome back.
Here we go again.
So, thank you, Commissioner Roth, for reminding us about why this topic is on the agenda.
Well, you know what? I think we should have a new motion to resolve that a person can only have their name on one item tonight. Then I will. Craig put too many letters
Yeah,
in there.
I'm hearing that from all around me here. So, yeah, heavy night for items on the agenda, tough items, and so I apologize for that. But this item, if you remember, we brought it to you in a work session, and there was a noticing requirement for the Home Builders Association of 90 days. So we have gone through that notice, home builders and any other interested party on SDC. So that was on a list, is the way that requirement is. So we posted it on our website, and we notified the Home Builders Association, and we have worked diligently to bring you a code revision that incorporates the comments that we heard from you in the work session, and that's what John is here to present. So we don't have a slideshow presentation for you, but we can bring up the text if that's important, but you already have it up on your screen.
No, it's not coming up.
Okay. So Katie will make sure it comes up. And with that, if you remember, there were several cleanup items in this. So John's going to go through all the details. I'll just leave it to him. But
my plan was to summarize rather than go through each modification. And in general, probably the most significant change is what the city had been doing with system development charges. In the case of a redevelopment, if the site had been unused for more than 18 months, then the redevelopment had to pay a full system development charge. If they were redeveloping where the most recent use had been within the last 18 months, then they received credit for that most recent use, the SDC for that most recent use, against their SDC, so it reduced the amount of their SDC. What we found in researching other jurisdictions and really taking a fresh look at this policy was that 18 months wasn't enough time to incentivize redevelopment. And so what this resolution reflects is a two-tiered approach. So if the redevelopment occurs within 4 years of the most recent use, then they would get a full SDC credit. If redevelopment occurs between 4 and 8 years after the most recent use, then they would only get half of the SDC credited to their SDC that would have been applied to the most recent use. Is that? And then if it's been longer than 8 years, then they have to pay the full SDC again, because you're basically saying if the site's been empty for 8 years, everything has changed, and they need to pay the full SDC at that point. There's also language in here that clarifies SDC deferrals. There had been short-term and long-term deferrals. Now there's only one. So if someone doesn't pay the full SDC up front, they can defer with terms. That's clarified in here. There was a section, a fairly long section near the end that's no longer applicable. The dates have expired, so that's been removed. There was an exemption for recreational facilities, a specific exemption for SDCs for recreational facilities. That's been removed as well. There's not a cost basis for that type of an exemption, so in order to make this more consistent with rate-making principles, that's been deleted. Most of the rest of the, there's one other that I would characterize as not quite housekeeping. In the going back to the description of redevelopment of a site that had already been developed, in the case where that redevelopment put a lesser impact on the system than the previous use, the city had been giving them a carryover credit, basically, and we're suggesting, and we found no one else that does this, by the way, so we're suggesting that in no situation would you provide them that type of a carryover. If if they're redeveloping to a lesser use, they just don't have to pay an SDC. You're not going to credit them back for that amount under the changes suggested here.
Is there a timeline associated with that?
Well, that would follow under the 4 to
8
8 year
before.
thing, yes. And then everything else is word changes in housekeeping in order to be consistent with statutory changes that have occurred over time. And I would say nothing else of any substance in the changes.
I've got a question. Where did you come up with the 4 and the 8?
Well, that was a result of a lot of conversations among the project team and as a result of the study session, which I think was way back in June.
Right. Yeah, so we, both internally as staff and then through the city commission, there was a balance between what we had, which was 18 months, which I think everybody was in agreement was too short, and eliminating that in its entirety and the complications associated with tracking that for staff and also tracking prior uses for staff, but also to help encourage vacant properties to move forward with their plans as quickly as possible so that they could receive. That's why the tiered approach, 4 years you get 100% of your credit, and if you're between 4 and 8 years you get 50% of your credit. So
Can I talk?
You absolutely
I
can.
am talking.
Yeah, absolutely.
My question about that is there an economic consideration in that 4 and 8 year eliminating the fee or crediting the fee? I don't see, I can see maybe in 100 years there'd be an economic consideration because maybe the utility connections or whatever you've got going into that building are going to change in those years. But in 4 to 8 years, I don't see a big difference happening that would impact the economic, constricting the new development person. And given the recent economic downturns we've experienced, I think that could still be a short period of time.
well, it's plenty of time for redevelopment to occur. If you're talking about does the expense side of the equation change, I guess my answer would be I don't believe it. I don't believe it does. It stays pretty constant over a 4 to 8 period. There may be some fluctuation in projects or master plans that are adopted, those kind of things, but yeah, for the most part, I don't think the expense side of that changes much from our analysis.
Well, what I'm more concerned with is the development portion. If we would have another economic downturn, I'm thinking of Japan. They've been in a 25-year downturn. It's totally possible here. And if we wanted to,
well, I mean, that's a tough example to match. My sense is if we were in that kind of a downturn and collectively there was agreement, we could change the code, just like we're proposing to do today.
Commissioner Smith, I'm going to take commissioners first. Commissioner Smith?
I think we've talked about this enough. I think this is at least the third meeting we've talked about it, maybe more. I think I appreciate the fact that this was brought to our attention at that first meeting. I think we've done a huge job in trying to rectify a timeline that was obviously way too small. I think this is comparable with what other cities are doing, and I think I don't have any problem with it.
Mayor Neely. Well, I look back at I'm not going to suggest anything about 25 years, but you take back 8 years as just before the recession. We we take great pride in Main Street, where in fact we do have incentives in terms of grants and so forth. We see very little development occurring in our other corridors. We've all seen the empty buildings, this false starts, and then they stop. I'd feel more comfortable with having the 8-year period be the period not having the half discount, but actually extending it over the 8-year period. It basically gives people that had something that they thought were coming forward in 2006 and the recession has some, it gives them the period of time to perhaps move fairly rapidly to take the benefit of this. But in a sense, I think I'm taking your position that given what we've been through and given that we haven't seemed to be able to incentivize development in our other corridors, I think this might be a possibility to help us move forward in those corridors. And so I'd prefer not to see the half reduction. I'd rather have that, not the 4-year, but applying it to the whole 8-year period. And we got Commissioner Pauly.
Yes. Our business has actually paid SDCs from expanding the use of our current business. So there's that too, not just, new coming in as a new business. Because our city is so old, we do have a lot of opportunities for redevelopment, as Mayor Neely was saying, in old corridors and old buildings. I would like to see a good amount of time. I don't recall what other cities have around us as far as time, but I want to make sure that we are competitive so that we need our rates, we need our money, we need our SDCs so that we can take care of our infrastructure. It's very important, but because of our age and the age of our buildings and redevelopment and how important that is for that to occur, and have people investing in our core and our old buildings, I think it's important to consider the length of time.
More time.
Anything else from the commissioners? Okay, Graham Peterson. It's not been so long.
Graham Peterson, Oregon City. So I wear a couple different hats as my experience with SDCs go, from the redeveloper side and then the commercial broker side. And I've just seen how SDCs impact projects moving forward or not moving forward. And I have a radically different view on timelines of SDCs, in that I don't think there should be an expiration, and that's taking it way further than you guys are. There are some SDCs that have occurred, new SDCs, I think Parks and PED.
Right.
So there's a lot of buildings that have not paid those, but the way I see SDCs is it's a one-time fee that should carry with that building, and once those fees have been paid, they've paid into the system. If they expand upon that baseline use that they've had, they can pay above and beyond, that's fine, but that baseline, in my view, should always follow with the property. And I've seen owners, for whatever reason, have zero motivation and happy to sit on buildings for, as much as 30 years. And we're in urban renewal, we're working on eliminating blight and creating incentives in this area to redevelop projects. But then in this area of SDCs, we've put I don't like putting the arbitrary word to it, because it may not have been an arbitrary decision, the 18 months or the 4 or the 8. But we're putting potentially a barrier to a redevelopment of a building that we'd otherwise like to see redeveloped, and we'll realize an increase in our tax base. So if we're outside of urban renewal, something on Malala Avenue that's had a tax assessed value of $2,000 for 20 years and has sat vacant, and all of a sudden somebody redevelops it, that skyrockets up to 12 grand a year. Well, now we've just realized $10,000 a year in gain ongoing. So that's my idea about SDCs and the expiration date of SDCs. So hopefully you are drinking the Kool-Aid that I'm drinking. Thanks.
I don't like Kool-Aid.
One thing, thank you for that, because I do respect that kind of feedback. There seems to be we're struggling a little bit with the fact that we've got a lot of needs in the community, and whether it be water or sewer or development. I mean, again, the constraints on options for how we deal with these to meet those needs is and I think what we find, especially with transportation SDCs, where our transportation SDCs are high, but they're limited by a project list that's not very long, right? We've got a short project list that helped establish that amount of that SDC, and so we find projects now that sometimes create they produce enough traffic that they create a failure in our transportation system, and because that project isn't on the list, because it wasn't necessarily one of the projects that was proposed to be funded through SDCs, that developer's on the hook for taking care of that project, and sometimes that's that might be a 4-lot subdivision, or normally it's something bigger than that. But I just think that we have a strong list of needs, and that have been vetted through our transportation system plan. We just approved, or we didn't approve, we continued a project, but I think that for the most part, the projects for the Lynn-Leland corridor plan are things that are supported. A lot of those projects aren't on our transportation. They weren't on the list of transportation SDC qualifying projects. So I get the concern. There's a revenue side of this too, and a needs side of this that I think needs to be considered. I think we considered that pretty heavily in our discussion about it. Wasn't an arbitrary decision. It was a decision that we were trying to balance. And so while some cities may not necessarily have a 8-year limitation, for Oregon City it's important. We've got a long list of community needs, and that's why we landed on the 4 and 8 year plan.
Sure.
I'm going to bring a different point into here, in that we've been talking about our SDCs and how they fall in the region, and them being extremely high, in my opinion. And I'm seeing this as a way to maybe mitigate what's hindering us in development, so that we're hindering people from developing because those fees are so high. If we gave this a longer time period, we may be able to bring other people in. And I'll remind you, I threw out 100 years. So,
so a couple things. Oh,
well, I'm not through yet. And I think that in doing that, if we could encourage development by doing that, we may be able to meet some of our needs by getting new development in here. Right now, I see that we're stagnant, and we're not going to be able to meet our needs because we're really discouraged them with the SDCs the way they are.
So one, I think on the SDCs, there's a difference between residential SDCs, which we're seeing ourselves, really very reasonably priced.
I'm talking about commercial.
In commercial, there's factors involved that we propose to bring to you for SDCs, for the SDC discussion, but there's also a little bit of the disconnect between what SDCs fund and what taxes fund for a new development. So if a new development comes to town, and there's the general tax base that's going to, but that doesn't necessarily pay for the infrastructure to get that there. So a lot of the reasons that we see why development isn't occurring, and lot of the reasons we see it is because for the most part the infrastructure isn't there, and it's complicated infrastructure. So if we're talking Beaver Creek Road or South End, our concept plan areas, a lot of the holdup for those areas is the lack of infrastructure, sanitary sewer and transportation being the big ones. So it is a chicken and egg thing. I think we're hearing the concern about SDC and the rate of SDCs, but we do think that there should be some limitations on the timing that a property owner gets for how long that property sits vacant.
There are some cities around Oregon and in the country actually that have tried to encourage economic development by not having SDCs at all. There are many states in the Midwest where I'm from that don't have SDCs of any kind. And Oregon's growth rate outpaces some of those states 2 or 3 to 1. The premise that SDCs, Graham was talking about, some of these building owners aren't motivated. They're all different. I mean, what's going to motivate one might not necessarily motivate the other one. We have talked about this a lot, so I'm going to be really brief, but I've never believed that if a building is going to develop or not develop over an SDC, especially one that's less than 20% of their overall development costs, if the margin's that thin, we probably don't have a good project anyway. That's a scary part. And we have to look at that and balance it against our tax base. Our SDCs are higher than a lot of our neighbors. Our land costs is lower than a lot of our neighbors. Rather than getting hung up on what doesn't or what subdues the economy, I like to think about what makes the economy vibrant. And having healthy systems, whether they're transportation or any of the other infrastructure the city has. If you don't have healthy systems, we don't have opportunity for those businesses, and that's the hardest piece.
We'll get to you, William. I'm going to put my request to speak and trump you. The Beaver Creek example and the South End example, I don't quite follow. Those are new developments. We're talking about, I think, from my standpoint, areas that are being redeveloped. And so I'm talking about Molalla, and I'm talking about the 7th Street corridor, and I'm talking about Beaver Creek, not out towards the college, but Beaver Creek, where not much has happened in that area, where there's already opportunities for redevelopment. And so that's, and as I say, you've got so many areas in which you have dilapidated structures, buildings that are empty, false starts that have gone on in those areas that I don't know what degree the SDC issue is the issue that stops it, but the fact is nothing happens there.
Four to 8 is better than 18 months, so.
Well, I'm shooting for 8. Period.
I'll compromise on
I'm not going to average 108 together.
My thinking with the 8 is that if it was just 8 and not 4 and 8 and just 8, it would be less confusing to everybody involved.
That's
they
true.
would just know that's what it is, and they can plan accordingly and do their construction schedule accordingly to that.
Yeah, that adds that step adds an element of complexity that is, appreciate you recognizing it. We've had trouble with stepped things in the past, stepped SDCs in the past. So,
And if that's going to help the commission reach a consensus, I'm very much in favor of that, as well as I believe it is a more streamlined approach, and I don't think it's going to make a lot of difference on the public policy side of it.
I have another question. Since we're changing the ordinance and the way that we're approaching the development, would we have a start date? Say, okay, everybody starts over, I don't know, 2030 or whatever. So how do we figure the actual date that there was nothing happening on that property anymore, is what I'm saying?
we put a lot of that burden on the property owner when they come in to develop, to show us rent receipts, show us something that indicates if it's, a burned building, for instance. Well, there's a report associated with that. But that's why extending it too long becomes problematic for, especially if the property changes hands. It's difficult. So we can look at some of our mapping. We can use those. We're going to use whatever tools we can to kind of come to the conclusion that there was something there at one point in time, and trying to figure out what it was is something that the city staff and the property owner will work through.
But what I'm looking at is, say, my property went vacant 7 years and 10 months ago. And then the guy next door went vacant last week. So he's got 8 years out there. All of a sudden, I'm going to be developing. I'm going to be paying a lot of money, and he's going to start developing, and he's not going to be paying anything.
That's true. That's true. I think what we're setting is a date certain that a property owner, so, it doesn't matter location. It's really about whether or not the property was developed within the 8 years, or had some development on it within the 8 years or 4 years, or whatever time we're talking about. So it could have two completely different SDCs for two different neighbors, just like, you'd have different uses for, the uses could be different too, so the SDCs may vary quite a bit based on use for neighboring properties.
William Gifford, are you going to confuse us? He nods.
Mr. Mayor and City Commissioners, my name is William Gifford, and I live in Oregon City. I am pro SDCs because I think that they need to address the impact that they are having on our infrastructure. That said, and understand that I believe that we have to pay our way, that development has to pay the cost of the future impacts that it has on our infrastructure. I have to say that I'm swayed by Mr. Peterson's comments about how that infrastructure gets paid for. And SDCs aren't the only way to pay for that infrastructure. The increase in property taxes is going to significantly, and much more so, use the word ameliorate 3 times in one night, but there you go. Ameliorate the impact of that impact on the infrastructure. That is to say, if you increase the value of a piece of property, those taxes are going to occur year after year after year after year and accumulate, as opposed to the one-time SDC fee, which may be precluding the development of that property. The comments about about other states, particularly in the Midwest, where I'm from, that don't have SDCs and they have a slower growth rate, I don't know that that's necessarily a sound argument, because you can't directly correlate the SDCs and growth rates. I think that there may be significantly other factors as to why our growth rates are higher, so I would discount that. The concept about healthy systems is absolutely correct. We have to have healthy systems, because healthy systems is what's going to drive a healthy community. We have to pay for those systems. The question comes down to how to fund it. We do use artificial means through urban renewal, through EIDs, through other opportunities that we use to incentivize development and growth. And those are considered an investment, a sound investment. Everybody loves what we do with those investments. It seems to me is that the deferral of the cost of paying for those impacts with SDCs could also be looked at as an investment for development. That is to say, by not, I'm saying charge SDCs for if it's changed use. I mean, if they have expanded something, if they built something that was never there before that's going to have a significant impact on the infrastructure, sure, pay for it. But don't penalize somebody because they're going to be building something that was already there that the SDCs had already paid for before. And yes, 8 years is, as a single tier, is less confusing than 4 and 8, but no tier at all is even less confusing.
If I might, just one comment.
Yeah, that's what. So,
I'm going to make a comment first. Our public infrastructure is paid for not by property taxes.
That's
Their
correct.
rates, their utility rates, their SDCs. Property taxes increase, that's great, because we don't have enough police. We don't have enough people in Parks and Rec. We could use more. And that's where the property taxes are going to go to. But all our infrastructure is not paid by, in fact, as far as I know, none of it's paid for by property taxes. They're paid by the utility users.
Yeah, the other thing is a lot of, the dates, I want to say SDCs, and John could probably answer this, SDCs didn't actually come into play until the 80s. And we've added to that, over time. We've adopted SDCs over time. So I've heard some people argue that, well, yeah, but they paid property taxes. And, well, again, property taxes weren't what funded the sewer and infrastructure that SDCs now fund. Some of that was federally funded in the past, and a lot of it's been developer funded through construction. And I wouldn't say that at some point in time this city maybe didn't ever use property taxes for infrastructure, but we haven't done that in a very, very long time. So our ability to fund infrastructure is through SDCs and rates. And when we get lucky and there's an opportunity for grant funding, we might see something there. But other than that, no.
Uncertainty in terms of any transportation dollars coming through the federal system is
right. We know where that's at. That's pretty bleak.
I think the other difficult part, and I agree with William in terms of, you do get the increased property value, the increased property taxes, which is capped at 3% per year and an increase. But let's say you put in with a new building that gets an assessed value of $1 million. We're roughly at $4.41 per thousand. That's about $4,400. It takes a long time to come up with enough money at that per year to do anything with. So there's a lot of factors that go into this, and it's pretty complicated, and SDCs are just one part of that puzzle. And it is. Is it 4 years? Is it 8 years? Is it? I mean, that's a policy discussion, but.
But still, we're talking about redevelopment rather than new.
Right, and the hard part is that a lot of what you see, like our downtown, most of that was built pre-system development charges. We've gone throughout the city and significantly up-zoned properties for increased uses, which meant we needed additional infrastructure. So the up-zoning that causes that additional infrastructure needs to get paid for somehow, and SDCs becomes one part of that. And then obviously you've been through the transportation system plan, you see the unfunded liability component that's in there. So it's a hard puzzle to put together.
That's why we like the balanced approach, and we think, we propose 4 and 8, but if it, like the city manager just said, if we can get through a decision on this tonight, that would be great.
I hear a motion. Shoot.
Just a technical thing. You've got an ordinance.
Right.
And if you're going to change it, you better do it at the front end.
Yeah.
All right. And I guess what you ought to do is get some consensus as to whether you want to stay with what you have, change it so it's all 8, because that's what I've been hearing in testimony, or something else, so that I can do the wordsmithing that's necessary to get this done.
Well, motion will do that, though.
He
Or
needs
do-
time to.
You need time to do it.
I can do it within a half hour, less than that, probably 10 minutes maybe,
So if we
depending
were,
where you want to be.
so we are either to keep it 4 and 8 or change it to.
Change it to something else. I've heard 8, and
Yes.
I've done that in my mind anyway.
Yes. So we could change it to 10 years.
Eliminate the altogether. Yeah.
I'm looking for a motion that indicates whether there's be a change or not.
I could.
Okay, I'm going to move that we move forward with this, but with a change to the duration. on the extension time for the SDCs.
Of what?
Duration of how long?
10 years. Go for it, Kathy. You could do it.
Okay, I'll say 10 years.
I'll second that.
Now you're going to have to actually.
I got to see if you got 3 votes for that, and then I'll do the
This won't be a
wordsmithing.
reading. So
I just go ahead with the vote?
yeah, I think you go ahead with the vote. Four votes for.
The 5.
5 votes for. Oh, okay, that was an old vote. Okay, so it's unanimous. 10.
Okay, if you want to move on to the next item, I'll
We'll do that.
do that, and then I'll bring it back to you.
Let's talk about marijuana.
No, we're talking about taxes.
Let's talk about marijuana.
That I need.
Captain, do you have any comments about marijuana?
Here we're talking. I think before we get into this, we're talking about ordinance for introduction of tax on the sale of marijuana. We currently have two things. We do not. We prohibit dispensaries under current zoning in any zone, number one. Number two, we've gone ahead for the 1-year moratorium. If we pass this, we have nothing to tax. But the point is, if at any point marijuana distribution comes to Oregon City, and we don't act on this, we're not going to be able to tax it. Is that correct?
Probably not.
Probably not. So this is kind of a fail-safe motion, ordinance that we had. Should we actually, whether marijuana in general is legalized or whether we're dealing with only the dispensaries, we want the ability, should we just, that marijuana is stored in Oregon City, we want to be sure that we are able to tax it. And so this doesn't mean we're going to get marijuana tax revenue, because currently we do not permit marijuana sales in Oregon City.
Right.
Is that a fair summary?
Yes.
Yes, it's good. Good job.
So that's what's before us.
I'll move it.
Second.
Well, hold on. Before, if I might have a suggestion, that's why it's moved and seconded.
Very effective summary, Your Honor.
Yeah. I think the rate ought to be discussed, and we're talking about
Oh, I thought we didn't have to do that at this point. We just had to allow ourselves to tax it. I didn't think.
No, it's in the ordinance what the rate is.
Yeah.
Yeah, the rate is,
Sure.
it's 5 and
5 and
10,
10.
yes. It's 5 for medical and 10 for recreational.
Okay.
Why so small?
Yeah.
Well, in consulting with the city attorney, we could have taxed it at 15 or 20. The highest other city that other cities are considering is 10, and we would rather, how do I say this? We don't want to create unnecessary legal challenges or liabilities for Oregon City.
What is the timeline for us to get through this?
Almost immediately.
Yeah, you don't have
30-day period.
a timeline.
I heard someone discussing in another city to tax producers as well as dispensary. So that's in here?
I can't remember if the producers.
Yeah, let's take a look at that, because that'd be producers, whether producing.
Because I think what Your Honor, you mentioned that to me, and I talked to Carrie Richter, who's not here tonight.
Manufacturer.
Carrie Richter said if we call it producer, I think there was some more liability concern that she had about that. But we left manufacturer in there. We didn't use the word producer.
It raised an additional ground for challenge, is what she's told me. And
So manufacture and sales is what's being
Yes.
covered here. Can
Yes.
you tell me what manufacture is? Are they actually taking the agricultural product and converting it to something else?
that's correct, and it
says-
is defined.
Any person engaged in the manufacture, planting, cultivation, growing, or harvesting.
Oh, well, in that case, that's a producer.
Yeah.
Okay.
We just didn't use.
You didn't use that word. That's fine. It covered what I was hoping would be in there.
Places.
Yeah.
Here and then 5 and 6.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. We understand what's involved, 5% tax on medical marijuana, 10% tax on recreational, and is the 10% applied to manufacturers irrespective of whether they're producing for medical or recreational? I don't know if they're going to make the distinction ultimately.
There was something problematic in going further than we have.
Okay.
We've got it as broad as we're comfortable
All right.
with.
Can I ask for the vote, please?
Don't you have to read the?
Have to read the
Oh.
ordinance.
Yes, you have.
You've made a motion and second?
It has been moved by Commissioner Roth and seconded by Commissioner Moore.
This is ordinance number 14-1014, an ordinance establishing a tax on the sale of marijuana and marijuana-infused products in the city of Oregon City and adding a new Oregon City Municipal Code subchapter 3.06.
Vote, please. Passes unanimously.
Think so?
The only reason we're having long discussions here is we're getting tired, right?
Better get us- Do you want to do a second reading and adopt tonight, or do you want to
Sure.
wait?
Let's do it.
Okay.
All right, so we'll need a motion again.
Motion to do adopt and final reading.
Second reading and final adoption, yep.
What happened?
I second that.
Wait, so I'm sorry, the
So-
same ordinance?
Yes,
Yeah,
second
second
reading.
reading.
We can do that if we do a unanimous vote, we
Unanimous.
can go into a second reading.
Right.
Okay. So let's try that again. Can you do the motion? Do you have?
Move to approve.
Second reading and final
Second
adoption.
reading, final adoption.
I second that.
Okay, moved by Commissioner Mum and seconded by Commissioner Bally,
He's got to read
Got
it.
to read it again.
and he's got to read it again.
Sorry. And it just disappeared, so let me get it. This is ordinance number 14-1014, an ordinance establishing a tax on the sale of marijuana and marijuana-infused products in the city of Oregon City and adding a new Oregon City Municipal Code subchapter 3.06.
Okay, hold on. Okay, vote is unanimous again. Okay. With that, we're coming over to the public hearing of the, make sure I got this right on the right page here. Yes, we're going into calling it for a public hearing on the continuance of the Economic Improvement District. Be Eric Underwood.
Thank you, Mayor. As you know, the current Economic Improvement District was established in April 2011, so it's coming up on its expiration. This is a request for the Commission to call a public hearing to continue that assessment on property owners within the Economic Improvement District. The benefit of the Economic Improvement District is pretty broad. Examples of the project that have been completed are, well, that was presented to you a couple of weeks ago by the Main Street manager. The continuance is necessitated by the activities that have yet to be completed or have been planned for the future years to further enhance the economic vitality of the district. Examples of those activities that are planned are bolstering of business / developer recruitment for downtown, a housing recruitment program that's been proposed, ongoing marketing and promotions, infrastructure improvements including gateway, art, light pole flags, and public right-of-way enhancements, grant writing and publicity and advocacy. So the Economic Improvement District is proposed to continue for another 3 years to apply the assessment on the property owners, which is a 1% assessment. If the Commission decides to move forward with the notice for the public hearing, the schedule would be that the first public hearing would be on November 5th. If less than a 33% remonstrance is received from property owners of the district, notice of a second public hearing with assessment estimates will be mailed by November 12th. The second public hearing will occur at a regularly scheduled City Commission meeting on December 17th, and then the ordinance will be effective January 17th.
Okay. Or no changes planned in the boundaries or anything? of
No.
that nature?
No, but property owners' boundary all stays the same.
Move to approve resolution number 14-24.
Second that.
All in favor? Unanimous. Okay. And that leaves us with the something I was trying to get before us much earlier. Second reading of ordinance number 141010, an ordinance vacating existing 26-foot public alleyway between lots 2 and 3 and lots 6 and 7 of block 117 of the Oregon City subdivision. Again, John Lewis, if you want to say anything more.
There's not much more to say about this one. It's a second reading. It's a piece of property that we own. The Barclay School is located on, and this is really just a administrative cleanup item.
That's right. So do I see a motion? Moved by Commissioner Pauly, second by Commissioner Mum, and the first reading.
This is ordinance number 14-1010, an ordinance of the City of Oregon City vacating the 26-foot wide public alley located between lots 2 and 3 and between lots 6 and 7, all of block 117 of the Oregon City plat, a duly recorded plat in Oregon City, Clackamas County, State of Oregon.
Do we want to go for a second reading?
This is the second reading.
This was the second reading. I'm sorry. Never mind.
I didn't know. I didn't know we could do that.
Yeah, we're on a roll.
Yeah, we're on a roll. Okay, now for the consent agenda.
You want to go back to the
Yeah.
the SDCs?
Oh, yes. Excuse me. Absolutely.
All right. So if you call that up on your screens, find it. It's ordinance number 14-1011.
Okay, there it is, and it's got it active, so we should be able to pull it up. Okay, here.
Okay, let me read the changes so you know, I'm going to have to read them officially, but just so you can follow along first. Go to the definitions on page 2, 1320.020, definitions. After that first little paragraph, for purposes of this chapter, the second paragraph is the one that's going to be changed. Okay? So instead of most recent structure or use means the most recent legally approved use conducted on the subject property within the previous 10 years from the date of the permit application. A property upon which there has been no development within the previous 10 years does not have a most recent structure or use. That's the first set of changes. Now if you go to page 5 and go to the very bottom, section 13.20050, changes just a little bit more. In the event an applicant's development involves the redevelopment of property, comma, the applicant may be eligible for a reduced SDC, period. That's all in the existing one. And I added the words, in that event, comma, the. Right, so it relates back to this redevelopment issue. The amount of the SDC assessed upon the development shall be calculated by the director as follows, colon. I've eliminated the A, and then I've kept that, the rest of it, and except that it now reads, for redevelopment occurring within 10 years of the most recent structure or use, comma, it is the SDC required under the current methodology, minus the SDC that would be attributable to the already existing structure or use, period, and eliminate B. All right, those are the two sets of changes, and if you're ready to make a motion, I will have to read the changes again in order to make it work.
Move to approve ordinance number 14-1011.
Second.
As revised.
As revised.
Okay. This is ordinance number 14-1011, an ordinance of the City of Oregon City amending Chapter 13.20, System Development Charge for Capital Improvements relating to SDC credits or reductions based on a development's most recent structure or use. There are two changes. The first is on page 2 of the proposed ordinance under section 13.20.020, definitions, and it's the second paragraph which is now revised to read as follows. Most recent structure or use, in quotes, means the most recent legally approved use conducted on the subject property within the previous 10 years from the date of permit application. A property upon which there has been no development within the previous 10 years does not have a most recent structure or use. The second change is on pages 5 and 6, and it's to section 13.20.050, SDC reduction or reimbursement. That will be revised to read as follows. In the event an applicant's development involves the redevelopment of property, comma, the applicant may be eligible for a reduced SDC, period. In that event, the amount of the SDC assessed upon the development shall be calculated by the director as follows, colon. For redevelopment occurring within 10 years of the most recent structure or use, it is the SDC required under the current methodology minus the SDC that would be attributable to the already existing structure or use. And those are the changes.
Vote, please. Unanimous. Do we want to go in for a second reading?
Do you want to do a second, or do you want to kick it over? You ready to do
Move to approve second and final adoption.
I second that.
of the revised version?
Of the revised version.
All right, this is ordinance number 14-1011, an ordinance of the City of Oregon City amending Chapter 13.20, System Development Charge for Capital Improvements relating to SDC credits or reductions based on a development's most recent structure or use. There are two changes. The first is in section 13.20.020 on page 2 of the proposed ordinance. Second paragraph now reads, most recent structure or use, in quotes, means the most recent legally approved use conducted on the subject property within the previous 10 years from the date of permit application. A property upon which there has been no development within the previous 10 years does not have a most recent structure or use. The second set of changes are to section 13.20.050 on pages 5 and 6 of the proposed ordinance, which is now revised to read as follows. 13.20.050, SDC reduction or reimbursement. In the event an applicant's development involves the redevelopment of property, comma, the applicant may be eligible for a reduced SDC, period. In that event, comma, the amount of the SDC assessed upon the development shall be calculated by the director as follows, colon. For redevelopment occurring within 10 years of the most recent structure or use, it is the SDC required under the current methodology minus the SDC that would be attributable to the already existing structure or use. And then it would continue to, on that last paragraph, if the SDC attributable to the most recent structure or use exceeds the SDC assessed upon the applicant's development, then no SDC shall be owed and no refund or reimbursement shall be granted.
Vote, please. Again, it passes unanimously. Okay, thank you very much. Now can we go on to the consent agenda?
Move to approve.
Second.
All those in favor? Passes unanimously. Now we'll go on to communications from the city manager.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. As you will recall, you approved a moratorium, or oh my gosh, you approved the MOU for the Riverwalk on the Willamette Falls Legacy Project recently, as well as our other partners, the county and Metro. But I'm happy to report that today the Oregon State Parks Commission also approved the MOU for the Riverwalk.
Great.
So that's unanimous approvals from all of our partners.
Great.
Can I pose a quick question, because we've had it come up. We have that March deadline or something for the use of the $5 million from the state. Is that at any risk at all?
Is it at any risk at all? So we have until the end of the biennium, but we put an estimate of March in order to get everything to the state. They need to approve the finance plan for the construction of the Riverwalk. So So we got multiple things that are in progress that are not complete yet. The land use document that's before the Planning Commission that we hope to have in front of you in August needs to be completed. We're currently negotiating the easements on both PGE and the property owner. Those need to be in place. And we're working on putting together a financial package that the state can approve. So we're working on all of them with the goal of having those completed.
Thank you.
Can I pose a question?
Yeah.
Are we ever going to meet the property owner as a commission?
Get the next mayor to appoint you to the.
Yeah, Doug and Carol have met him, and he's been to about half of the partner meetings, I think. I don't know when he's going to be down here again, but
Probably
we can,
be down for the land use hearings, I would imagine.
Yeah.
Yeah. Or the next time he's in town,
Mhm.
yeah, we can try and set something up.
Yeah.
Very good. Thank you.
That's it. Really, the only I discussed a couple of those things when we gave out the recognition of Larry Dahl to the fact he was inducted into the Hall of Fame of the Oregon Military Museum. The only other thing we did host the City Hall meeting for two of the Senate districts. The one that Oregon City is in, and the other one that Milwaukee is in, and it was well attended. There were elected officials from most of the cities, and we had the state representatives. There was some interesting discussion that occurred on some of the items that the League of Oregon Cities is putting forward. There were five items. We've presented those before that had really garnered the support of about cities that represented about 85% of the population of Oregon. And then and I don't have those with me today. We have regional meetings of the metro mayors once a month, and they will be putting forward 3 additional items to the legislature for backing for legislation as well, and that the regional mayors also agree to the 5 priorities of the League of Oregon Cities, and that's all I have to report. Mr. Smith.
I had a lot of meetings this month already. I won't go into great detail on all of them, but a lot of tourism meetings. I think there's a real interest in Oregon City through all of our heritage area, our heritage groups, and Main Street and Chamber, etc., to start talking more about tourism and how it relates to economic development. And so I know that will hopefully be a discussion that can continue within that group and hopefully bring some discussions, items to the commission at either a goals retreat or through staff. So that's being worked on. Had another heritage meeting in relationship to the event that the Oregon City Heritage Coordinating Committee is doing with their event in October, which is the Halloween walking tour event. Had a meeting with what we're calling the unofficial friends group for the Ermatinger House. There's a group of people that have worked with the house for a long period of time, who have interest in the ongoing protection and programming for the Ermatinger House. And so we've been meeting on a regular basis to start formulating some sort of a plan that eventually will work closer with staff and then bring it hopefully forward as well. Attended an event on 9/11 at Burgerville, and then the City Hall meeting, which was good. Went to the downtown cruise-in, which was awesome. I think we were all down there at some point in time during the day. We were at the very much awkward dedication of the installation of artwork on the street poles in the center of a street, which was had cars going up and down it, and cars revving their engines, and no microphone and no audience. But it was a good it was a good dedication for those things on Main Street, on the light poles. I loved it, and I kind of talk, the great thing about art is that we all have different interpretations of it, and every time we add a new piece of artwork downtown, there's this discussion that occurs. But one of the things that I kind of mentioned is just by driving by these things and seeing them kind of as this flower or bud that's kind of on the verge of blossoming, and very much what we've been doing in the downtown through multiple groups, including the Commission, Urban Renewal, Main Street, Willamette Falls Legacy, Willamette Falls Heritage Area Coalition, all these groups that have all been working on planting these seeds to what we hope is this amazing future of downtown. And so every time I drive by those, I kind of think of that. I think it kind of solidifies the work that we've done and kind of what we hope is going to come. But meeting the artists, got to talk about their interpretation and some of the icons that are in those sculptures and how they relate to the downtown was very exciting. Then last night I attended the Restore Oregon. They had an event. The mayor was there, and at the Ainsworth House, talking about the desperate need to focus on saving what's left of the original pioneer houses across the state, but not only that, but a lot of the original farm structures. And the good news is every time we go to one of those kind of presentations, there's many times where I just cringe at how poor of a job I feel that we've done in Oregon City in the past. But every time we go to these kind of things, we're always brought up as an example of the best. So yeah, right. I mean, so we have done a fairly good job in saving some really crucial properties in Oregon City, and this commission has done that by saving the Ermatinger House again. But this ongoing concern about houses that every couple of decades we have to figure out how to save these houses and what is the best use of these houses in the future, not just museums, but as residents, etc. And so made some good connections, which I've been talking with at Restore Oregon, and they've done several studies at various places across the state on how to create plans for how to make these houses, and not just museum houses, but museum houses included, and how to make them economically viable. And so definitely the Ermatinger House is one that we're all really concerned about, making sure that once it's done that we can continue to operate it and maintain it and all those things. So I've been working a lot on trying to solve some of those problems so that when we get the Ermatinger House done, we can have a discussion on how we move forward and protect it and have a plan for the future. Anyway, that's it.
Commissioner Monk,
I don't have anything.
Mr. Rock.
Nope. Nothing tonight.
You took all our time, Rocky.
Sorry.
We're tired. We want to go home.
I didn't take that long.
Yep. Pardon me? Well, given the presentation I was making, I ran home with a shame of trousers.
Are we adjourned?
Meeting adjourned.
Yeah.